Chapter 1538. Chuli looked at the heart-seeking grass not far away and shook his head. Other than this one, there were 3 other heart-seeking grass that did not seem to be valued by the 3 yellow cats. However, if he wanted to obtain the heart-seeking grass, he still had to get past the 3 cats. He suddenly turned his head and looked behind him. 3 cats had appeared on a rock and were looking at him lazily with a mocking expression. It was as if they were toying with him before killing him. He felt a chill in his heart as he recognized that these were King Kong cats. They looked small and delicate, but they were extremely terrifying. Not only were their bodies invulnerable to weapons and inner energy, but their vitality was also extremely strong. Once one was entangled by them, they would not stop until one was dead. More importantly, they were extremely fast, even faster than the flying cloud rat. They could be considered the flying cloud rat's natural enemy. Unfortunately, these 2 natural enemies were quite far away. Perhaps the flying cloud rat was so far away to avoid them. The omniscient mirror observed their surroundings and found that their minds were in a state of chaos. They seemed to have no thoughts and were in a state where they were not thinking. It was indeed strange. Meow! With a soft cry, 6 rays of yellow light shot towards him, 3 in front and 3 behind, forming a pincer attack. Chuli turned around and waved his sword. The sword gleamed like a white waterfall as it met the 6 cats. Ding, 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 ding. Amidst the clear sounds, he could not help but retreat, slowly approaching the heart-seeking grass. The 6 cats were small and delicate, unusually agile. They flew around in the air and almost never landed on the ground. However, their strength was getting stronger each time. It was as if the energy from the crouching tiger divine sword was being converted into an impact force, continuously accumulating strength. Chuli's arm was numb as he retreated step by step. Even though his body was strong, he did not have an advantage over the King Kong cats. It was hard to imagine that such a small body could contain such great strength. He could only marvel at the wonders of nature. Fortunately, he was getting closer to the heart-seeking grass. As long as he could get close, he could snatch it and disappear. No matter how strong the King Kong cats were, they would not be able to follow him back to the public house. He decided not to go directly to the Spirit Crane's peak, lest he lured them there. The tracking ability of spirit beasts should not be underestimated. Ding, 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 ding. His arm was numb as he got closer to the heart-seeking grass. It was getting closer and closer. He was overjoyed, but just as he was about to extend his hand, a yellow blur suddenly changed direction. It didn't shoot toward him, but toward the heart-seeker grass. The heart-seeking grass was bitten by the King Kong cat. It shook its head fiercely and easily pulled out the spiritual soil. Then it held it in its mouth and leaped onto a rock. It stared at him playfully, and he seemed to see the smile in its eyes. Chuli took a deep breath and suppressed his anger. It was humiliating that he was being played. He sped up and shot toward the King Kong cat. The King Kong cat leaped onto another rock and easily avoided the tame tiger divine sword. Then it leaped onto another rock. However, Chuli cautiously took a step back and did not chase after him. Although the omniscient mirror could not see through their thoughts, it vaguely understood that they were trying to lure him up. The omniscient mirror had already seen a group of King Kong cats up there. They were lazily lying on a rock, basking in the sun. They did not care about the fight here. Ding, 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 ding. Seeing that Chuli did not fall for the trick, the 6 cats pounced on him again. Then, the King Kong cat that was holding the heart-seeker grass suddenly stuck out its tongue and rolled the heart-seeker grass into its mouth. It chewed a few times and swallowed. Chuli's heart ached. The heart-seeker grass was not easy to find, and there were not many of them. There were still 3 around him. He could not afford to make any more mistakes. If he really lost the heart-seeker grass, he would not be able to refine the pure blood pill, and all his efforts would have been in vain. Ding, 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 ding. He suddenly appeared in front of the 3 heart-seeker grass and blocked them. The 3 King Kong cats had already shot over to deal with the 3 heart-seeker grass. The tame tiger divine sword was as dense as a net, blocking the 3 King Kong cats. He had to bear a strong rebounding force. The force on the sword was ineffective against the King Kong cats. Instead, They used it to increase their own strength. If this continued, the tame Tiger Divine sword would definitely fall out of his hands. He tried to use his fist and palm force, but it did not work. The King Kong cats seemed to be able to directly dispel the force of his palm and fist. When he used the Heavenly King Palm, the King Kong cats were not affected at all. Their bodies did not change, and they directly dispelled the Heavenly King Palm force. If he wanted to block them, he could only use the tame Tiger Divine sword. There was no other way. If he wanted to protect the Heartseeker grass, he could only block it. The other three cats also rushed over, specifically towards the Heartseeker grass. After a while, Chu-Li sighed helplessly. His arms were sore, and he could no longer hold on, so he suddenly disappeared. Meow meow. The 6 cats circled around the Heartseeker grass, but they did not find Chu-Li. Some were disappointed, and some left, leaving only the 2 King Kong cats beside the Heartseeker grass. The next moment, Chu-Li appeared in the High Duke's public house and activated the heavenly demonic power. He frowned, knowing that the heavenly demonic power alone could not stop them. So he activated the sacrifice formula and appeared next to the Heartseeker grass. Meow, meow. The 2 King Kong cats cried out and turned into 2 rays of yellow light as they pounced. Chu-Li's body expanded. He waved the tame Tiger Divine sword and repelled the 2 King Kong cats. He then pounced towards the Heartseeker grass. He picked up a Heartseeker grass with his left hand and blocked the 2 King Kong cats with the tame Tiger Divine sword. The cats' cries came from afar, and in the blink of an eye, they came close and turned into 6 rays of yellow light. Ding, 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 ding. He waved the tame Tiger Divine sword to block them and continued to pick up the second Heartseeker grass. Based on the King Kong cat's previous actions, he knew that the Heartseeker grass looked weak, but it was unusually tough. He did not need to carefully dig it up. Ding! His expression changed slightly. The force of this blow actually knocked the tame Tiger Divine sword away. He disappeared in the next moment and had already taken 3 Heartseeker grass. Meow, meow, meow. The cats' cries came one after another, revealing their anger. They were originally playing with Chu-Li, or else they would have taken the Heartseeker grass away. They left it behind to lure Chu-Li back. They did not expect Chu-Li to really take the Heartseeker grass away, which made them extremely angry. The next moment, Chu-Li appeared in his own courtyard in the public house. Xueling was waiting at the side. Seeing his embarrassed expression, she immediately sat cross-legged on the ground and quickly took the 3 Heartseeker grass, carefully placing them into the jade box. Chu-Li stopped circulating the sacrifice technique. His whole body felt weak, and he let out a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, he had taken so many giant spirit pills and had been compressed by the pool water with the evil nether dragon, which allowed his body to become so strong. Otherwise, even if it was Tang Su, it would be difficult for him to deal with the Diamond Cat. He extended his hand, and Xueling handed him the jade box. Chu-Li opened it and took out a Heartseeker grass. He planted it in the spirit soil and activated the life and death scripture. As he watched it gradually grow and blossom, Chu-Li waved his hand to let the pollen of the soaring grass float over. Then, the Heartseeker grass began to bear fruit. It only bore 1 fruit, and there was a seed in the fruit. Finally, the wise soil merged into the spirit soil, leaving only a seed. Chu-Li shook his head and smiled bitterly. This again, it was slightly better than the magnificent stone grass. At least there was a seed, but it was not very useful and could not be cultivated in large quantities. After that, he continued to look for other spirit seeker grass. Although it was difficult, he finally gathered 11 types of spirit seeker grass. Only the phoenix soaring grass was at the foot of the spirit leopard mountain. With his current ability, he could not defeat the spirit leopard mountain. If he went to the spirit leopard mountain, he would definitely die. The Heavenly Star Insight skill had already shown this result. Chapter 1539. Great Light Peak, Divine Light Basilica. In the early morning, the Light Palace was exceptionally bright. Tens of thousands of rays of golden light, thousands of strands of auspicious qi, like a celestial palace. But for Sun Mingwei, there was nothing much to see. No matter how beautiful the scenery was, she could see it every day, so she didn't find it very amazing. She paced back and forth in front of the desk with her hands behind her back, her eyebrows slightly furrowed. Chu Li suddenly appeared. Sun Mingwei turned to look at him and observed his expression. She frowned and asked, "Are you injured?" Chu Li smiled bitterly. Sun Mingwei smiled. "Did he fight with Tang Su?" "No." Chu Li shook his head and said, "I want to enter the Fu dynasty's forbidden palace to steal a spirit herb. Do you think that's possible?" "What do you think?" Sun Mingwei snorted. "Unless you could defeat Tang Su." Chu Li sighed and nodded. Sun Mingwei said, "Even if we work together, we won't be able to break into the great Fu dynasty's forbidden palace. Just give up." "I want Tang Kuin's help," Chu Li said. Sun Mingwei said, "He's not even afraid of death. How could he agree?" "I have my ways," Chu Li said, "but it's not appropriate to let him go. I need your permission." "I agree," Sun Mingwei said. "At most, he will continue to come and pester us." Chu Li sighed and shook his head. Once Tang Kun left safely, the disciples of the Holy Church of Light would inevitably start muttering among themselves. Could it be that the saint was really interested in him? Or could it be that she was afraid of the Fu dynasty, so she did not kill him? Sun Mingwei said, "I can't care about that now. Take a look." She took out a dossier and passed it to Chu Li. Chu Li quickly scanned through the list and raised his head in surprise. "The Qiu dynasty is sending troops again. There should be no mistake." Sun Mingwei nodded and said, "I didn't expect them to mobilize their troops again. They have just fought a battle and are injured. Shouldn't they rest and recuperate? Aren't they afraid that the Zheng dynasty will take the opportunity to attack?" Chu Li nodded. "The Li dynasty didn't offend the Qiu dynasty in any way, did they? A while ago, the Qiu dynasty sent someone over to ask for the sixth prince's hand in marriage, wanting to marry the fifth princess of the Li dynasty." Sun Mingwei scoffed and said, "They were rejected. Are they going to start a war because of this? This is ridiculous." Chu Li asked, "Could it be the Fu dynasty? What is Fu dynasty trying to do?" Sun Mingwei frowned. "Once the war breaks out, the balance between the four nations will be broken immediately. The Ji dynasty won't let go of such a good opportunity, and so will the Zheng dynasty. As a result, the four countries would be in total chaos." Chu Li said, "Perhaps the Fu dynasty is trying to rebuild their prestige through this." This time, Tang Haoyan was too careless and embarrassed himself. The Fu dynasty's prestige has also been greatly damaged, so it's inevitable that they're worried about the instability of the four nations. Sun Mingwei nodded thoughtfully before shaking her head. "This Tang Su is really cold-blooded. For the sake of Fu dynasty's dignity, he's brazenly stirring up chaos in the world. I wonder how many people will die." Chu Li smiled. "As the emperor, I don't care about human lives." With a thought, he suddenly executed the heavenly star void insight art. He narrowed his eyes and fell into deep thought, as if his soul had left the world. Sun Mingwei saw that his expression was strange and didn't disturb him. After a while, Chu Li looked at her, shook his head and sighed. "I can't. There's something strange going on. You have to be careful. This battle is related to your tribulation, so it's best that you don't leave the Great Light Peak." Sun Mingwei said, "How can I not leave the Great Light Peak?" Chu Li shook his head and said, "You'll be in danger once you leave the Great Light Peak." Sun Mingwei asked, "What kind of danger?" Chu Li frowned and pondered for a while before finally shaking his head. "I can't divine it, but I have a feeling that you'll definitely face a tribulation. You must not be careless. You're about to become an enlightened master, and there are countless people who want your life. It's not just Tang Su, there are others too. In less than a year, she would take over the position of Bishop of the Holy Church of Light and become the new enlightened master." Needless to say, the competition for the enlightened master's position was fierce. If anyone wanted to become an enlightened master, killing her would be the fastest way. Therefore, Tang Su was not the only one who wanted to kill her. The other sects of the Li dynasty and even the other countries had the same idea. After all, Sun Mingwei was too smart and powerful. The Holy Church of Light had only become so strong under her leadership. If she really took over the enlightened master's position and became the bishop of the Holy Church of Light, it would not be a blessing for the other countries. What should we do? Sun Mingwe frowned. We can't just watch the Li dynasty and the Qiu dynasty fight again, can we? Chu Li said, You can't stop it. Not even your master. If we can kill Tang Su, there's still a glimmer of hope. If not, no one can stop it. Let's just go with the flow. No. Sun Mingwe shook her head. Chu Li frowned and looked at her. Don't mess around. Tang Su is waiting for you to do this. I can't just watch them fight, Sun Mingwe said. Chu Li burst into laughter. Didn't the Li dynasty and the Qiu dynasty fight each other too? That's different, Sun Mingwe said. That was a small-scale battle. It's not worth mentioning. Chu Li said, You're not the bishop of the Holy Church of Light yet. It's not your turn to worry about this. It's better for you to cultivate and improve your cultivation level. You'll have more freedom after you become an enlightened master. He shook his head and felt that being an enlightened master was too boring. Sun Mingwe frowned and pondered. Chu Li looked at her and said helplessly, You should know if my divination is accurate. Don't treat it as child's play. All right, I'll be careful. Sun Mingwe nodded. Chu Li took out a piece of paper. Help me look for some spirit herbs. Sun Mingwe took it and shook her head. What pill are you going to refine during this period? For cultivation, Chu Li said. Sun Mingwe glanced at it and nodded. All right, since you've marked the location, it won't be difficult to find them. I'll give them to you in 5 days. They're still in 10 Despair Valley, right? Chu Li nodded, gave her a fist salute, and disappeared. Sun Mingwe looked at the place where he left and pondered for a moment. Finally, she shook her head and waved for the girl in green to come in. She then ordered her to look for the spirit herbs. Tang Kuan sat beside a campfire and roasted 2 deer. The golden oil sizzled on the fire, and the aroma filled the air. Tang Li squatted beside him and was slowly turning over the deer. Chu Li suddenly appeared. Tang Li turned and saw him. His face darkened, and he glared at him coldly. Chu Li, what else do you want? Chu Li smiled. I want to make a deal with your Royal Highness. What kind of deal? Tang Kuan smiled. What kind of deal can a dying man like me make? Chu Li said, I'm looking for a spirit herb from the Fu Dynasty's secret warehouse. I need your Royal Highness help. Spirit herb? Tang Kuan shook his head. You know my status. I'm not qualified to get important spirit herbs. Chu Li smiled. It's just a very common spirit herb. It's easy for your Royal Highness to get it. Oh, Tang Kuan looked at him in surprise. What can I exchange for such a spirit herb? Your Royal Highness life. Chu Li smiled. I'll spare your Royal Highness this time. What do you think? Is it really that easy? Tang Kuan smiled. Chu Li nodded. The saint has agreed, so your Royal Highness life is saved. Congratulations, your Royal Highness. All right, tell me what spirit herb it is, Tang Kuan said. Chu Li took out a piece of paper and passed it to him. Tang Kuan glanced at it and nodded. Phoenix flight grass. I know about it. It's said to have the effect of curing eye diseases. Chu Li smiled and nodded. Your Royal Highness is very knowledgeable. There were very few people who knew about this spirit herb, and even fewer people who knew about its effects. Tang Kuan could tell at a glance that it was really powerful and superior to him. It was a pity that such a person was born with a deficiency and could not achieve anything. I'll send it to the Holy Church of Light, Tang Kuan said. Is there any way to restrain it, so that it won't act shamelessly? Chapter 1540. Actually, we can be friends, said Tang Kuan with a smile. Chu Li smiled. I'm fortunate to have a friend like the Royal Highness. It's a pity that we can't be friends because of our identities. Tang Kuan shook his head and sighed. This is the will of the heavens. Don't worry, I will send this phoenix soaring grass over, and I won't ask what it is used for. Chu Li shook his head and smiled. A spirit herb like this can threaten Tang Su. I'm sure the Royal Highness doesn't believe it either. Although this is a spiritual herb, it is actually quite ordinary. Tang Kuan nodded and said, Because of my body, I have devoted myself to studying medicine. This grass is indeed ordinary. It is a bit of a loss to exchange it for my life. Chu Li smiled and took out a few pieces of white paper from his inner pocket and handed them over. I have the same intention. Your Royal Highness's life is not that cheap. Bring me these spirit herbs as well. You? Tang Kuan pointed at him and smiled helplessly. You've really fallen into a trap of your own making. All right, I admit defeat. But Chu Li, you're a smart man. You know where my limits lie. Don't worry, Your Royal Highness. All the spirit herbs here were obtained by Your Royal Highness. They're not considered precious, Chu Li said. Although it was not precious, it was very rare. If he wanted to go to the 100,000 Great Mountains to find it, he would have to go through many hardships and dangers. It was best to find it in the Great Fu Dynasty's imperial palace. Tang Kuan took the white paper and flipped through it one by one. He nodded in satisfaction and put it away. He smiled and said, "Good, then it's settled. Wait for my good news." Chu Li extended his hand. "Your Royal Highness, please do as you please. I'll take my leave first." As he spoke, he suddenly disappeared. Tang Kuan only felt a flash in front of him, and the scenery suddenly changed. He was back in the forest, but this forest was completely different from the forest he had seen before. Looking down at the bonfire they were in, it was in the middle of a pile of rocks. Tang Li frowned and said, "Your Highness, what trick is he playing? Are you sure you want us to leave?" Tang Kuan smiled. "Since you're letting us go, then let's go. Why be so suspicious? This surname, Chu, doesn't seem like a good person. He won't let us go for nothing." Tang Li snorted and said, "If it weren't for him, we wouldn't have suffered here for so many days. All right, since you lost the bet, go back." Tang Kuan waved his hand. Tang Li nodded bitterly and helped him walk out of the forest. Everyone's martial arts had been crippled, and they had long disappeared. Only the two of them walked out of the forest alone. Chu Li stood outside the forest and observed Tang Kuan's thoughts. He nodded to himself. This Tang Kuan was truly interesting. He didn't have any intention of going back on his word, and indeed wanted to fulfill the deal. His resentment towards Tang Su was extremely deep, and now he already knew the reason. His current weakness was caused by Tang Su. When Tang Su was 10 years old, he pretended to injure him unintentionally. In the end, he was injured in his dantian and kidneys. Both his innate and acquired essence chi were damaged and couldn't be replenished. As a result, his body was in such a terrible state that he was always sick and unable to recover. Seeing this, Chu Li felt more at ease and left. 7 days later, Chu Li stood beside the pool and looked up at the sky with a solemn expression. Tang Kuan found the phoenix flight grass, and Chu Li refined a batch of pure blood pills. He gave the evil nether dragon 5 pills. After the dragon and human went through a painful struggle, both he and the evil nether dragon became slightly stronger, but there was no new dragon chi in its body. The art of dragon control was still at the 6th level. He frowned and thought hard, feeling helpless. It was getting harder and harder to advance the art of dragon control. It was like climbing a mountain to the peak. Every step was extremely difficult, and he had to struggle and work hard with all his might. He had used everything he could, but he still couldn't break through to the 7th level. This was only from the 6th to the 7th level. He didn't know how difficult the remaining 2 levels would be. Just thinking about it made his scalp go numb. As he was thinking hard, he suddenly looked up at the sky and saw 2 white clouds slowly floating down. It was Sun Mingwei and Song Wanqing floating down. He used the omniscient mirror to observe and saw Sun Mingyue's solemn expression. Song Wanqing's face was as pale as paper, and her eyes were dazed. The situation wasn't good. He couldn't help but be shocked. Song Wanqing was an enlightened master, but she was actually so heavily injured. Who was it? Only an enlightened master could injure an enlightened master to this extent. He directly stepped forward and held Song Wanqing's hand. At the same time, he held Sun Mingyue's, and the two of them immediately connected their auras, transforming into an extremely mellow aura that drilled into Song Wanqing's body, nourishing her almost shattered body. Song Wanqing was on the verge of death, allowing him to do as he pleased. She forced herself to look at Sun Mingwei, then at Chu Li. She didn't even have the strength to speak, but she could feel the mellow aura recovering her body. It was as if she was soaking in a hot spring, so comfortable that she wanted to sleep. Sun Mingwei pursed her red lips and didn't say a word. She stared at Song Wanqing, afraid that she would leave. Chu Li realized that her aura was weak. Even if the two of them worked together, they wouldn't be able to leave much of the mellow aura. To Song Wanqing, it was too little. Chu Li frowned and said helplessly, "We need the supreme diamond scripture." "Yes," Sun Minghua said. The two of them had a tacit understanding, so they directly brought Sun Minghua into the secret cave and put Song Wanqing outside. The two of them dug out a rock and entered the cave. They took off their clothes and began to cultivate the supreme diamond scripture. Sun Minghua didn't care that her master was outside and devoted herself to cultivation. She quickly replenished her aura and was about to separate when Chu Li said, "Let's cultivate like this." Sun Minghua was startled and slowly nodded. She stretched out her jade-like arm and placed it on the other side of the cave. She pressed it on Song Wanqing's back and poured in a mellow aura. As time passed, a mellow aura was born from the two of them and poured into Song Wanqing's body, slowly repairing her broken body. The remaining tyrannical aura in her body was still destroying her internal organs. If it wasn't for their mellow aura being able to suppress it, no amount of spiritual energy would be able to slow down her injuries. After 6 hours, the two of them finally separated. Song Wanqing was already able to circulate her mental cultivation method and use her inner energy to heal her injuries. Song Wanqing had long woken up but pretended not to so that the three of them wouldn't feel awkward. Chu Li put on his clothes and left quietly. After a while, Sun Minghua also left the cave and came to his side. She was beautiful and charming, no longer as solemn as before. Chu Li came to the side of the pool and looked at her. Sun Minghua frowned and scoffed. "It's Monk Luan Ming's doing." Chu Li was surprised. Song Wanqing's cultivation level should not be weaker than Monk Luan Ming. Sun Minghua said, "There's something strange about the reincarnation temple's Will Pagoda. Master was plotted against." Chu Li slowly nodded. Sun Minghua scoffed. If Master didn't desperately escape, he might have ascended to heaven in the reincarnation temple. Chu Li frowned and pondered. Sun Minghua looked at him. "What did you think of? Could this be Tang Su's plan?" Chu Li frowned. "If you become an enlightened master, will he be able to deal with you?" "Yes." Sun Minghua nodded. "But won't we be stronger if we join forces?" Chu Li sighed. "After you become an enlightened master, he might make a move immediately. He's just waiting for the moment you become an enlightened master." Sun Minghua was dubious. Chu Li said, "At the same time, he's using the tactic of luring me away so that we can't join forces." He narrowed his eyes and performed the Heavenly Star Insight skill. Chapter 1541. After a while, he opened his eyes and frowned at Sun Minghua. Sun Minghua asked, "Why are you looking at me?" Chu Li sighed. "Looks like there's more than one enlightened master involved. Let's ask Senior Song." This meant that the enlightened masters were interfering. Although the Heavenly Star Insight was amazing, it could not see the enlightened masters' movements. This was also the strength of the enlightened masters. After all, it was difficult to see their destiny. Sun Minghua frowned. Master has never suffered such a huge loss. She must be furious. Forget it. She respected and loved Master Song Wanqing, but was not brave. Song Wanqing had high hopes for her, so she was very strict with her. She had developed a love and fear mentality since young. Even now that she had grown up, it was difficult to change. Chu Li asked, "Aren't you curious about what's going on?" "You ask." Sun Minghua scoffed. Chu Li smiled and nodded. As they spoke, Song Wanqing stood at the entrance of the cave and looked at their backs. She sighed. She did not know if it was good or bad for Sun Minghua. Once Sun Minghua became an enlightened master, she would be far away from Chu Li. There were too many restrictions and taboos for enlightened masters. They could not be as free as grandmasters. This was the price to pay for power. Moreover, as a man, especially someone like Chu Li, he had always been arrogant. How could he tolerate his woman being above him? It would be fine for a short period of time, but as time went on, he would not be able to tolerate it and would eventually separate. She shook her head and looked at the two. She sighed again. If Sun Minghua had a different identity, she might have stayed with Chu Li for the rest of her life. Unfortunately, she was a saint. If she wanted to become an enlightened master, she was destined to be alone for the rest of her life. However, once they became enlightened masters, they could not be together because one was from the Li dynasty while the other was from the Fu dynasty. They were destined to be rivals. As she sighed, she saw Chu Li suddenly turn his head. She glided to their side. Chu Li fist saluted. Senior Song. Thank you, Chu Li, Song Wanqing said calmly. Chu Li asked, Senior Song, how did you get so injured? Did Monk Luan Ming team up with Qinjinji? Even if they worked together, they wouldn't be able to injure you so severely, right? Song Wanqing said they didn't join hands. It was Monk Luan Ming who brought the monks of the Reincarnation Temple. Chu Li was shocked. They can hurt you? Song Wanqing sighed and said, You underestimate the Reincarnation Temple. Chu Li looked like he was all ears. Have you seen the Reincarnation Temple's Reincarnation Pagoda? Song Wanqing said. Chu Li nodded. It gives off a dangerous vibe. He had seen the Chakram Pagoda before. It was made of bronze, and although the omniscient mirror could not see it clearly, he had seen the situation inside the Chakram Pagoda from Monk Zhishan's mind. The murals had helped him improve his Earth Matrix and reincarnation scripture a lot. Song Wanqing said, The Wheel Pagoda is not only the inheritance tower of the Reincarnation Temple, it also hides a trump card. Chu Li looked at him curiously. Song Wanqing scoffed. They gathered 9 top-notch grandmasters in the tower, and then gathered their power to attack, transforming it into an earth-shattering power that directly attacked the soul. Soul? Sun Mingwei said, Not inner energy? Song Wanqing shook her head lightly. If it's inner force, then it's not scary. Chu Li said, Senior, how did you escape? I was lucky enough, Song Wanqing scoffed. Song Wanqing snorted and said, When I was knocked unconscious by them, I hit a sharp rock and woke me up. I escaped with this bit of spirit. Monk Luan Ming also made a move. Sun Mingwei gritted her teeth. Song Wanqing said, How could he let go of such an opportunity to take advantage of the situation? Unfortunately, he was alone. If he had Chun Jinji to help him, I would have been dead by now. As she said this, she smiled coldly, and a cold light flashed in her eyes. What a reincarnation temple! Sun Mingwei scoffed. I've underestimated them. She did not expect Monk Luan Ming to have such a trump card, but he did not show it. Why would he show it now? Master did not have such a big grudge against him. Could it be that it was Tang Su's scheme? Murderous intent rose in her heart, and she turned to look at Chu Li. Chu Li nodded, indicating that he understood. They wanted to settle the score with Monk Luan Ming after this, completely ending this grudge, and send Monk Luan Ming to heaven. Song Wanqing glanced at them, and said lightly, I'll take revenge. Master, can you defeat him? Sun Mingwei asked. Song Wanqing glared at her. Sun Mingwei shrunk her head, and said helplessly, Let's go. We must send Monk Luan Ming to heaven. It's better for such a sinister person to die as soon as possible, lest he becomes a huge threat to the Li dynasty. I originally wanted to discuss a truce with him, but I didn't expect to fall into his trap. If it wasn't for a truce, I wouldn't have entered the temple to chat with him. Song Wanqing laughed coldly. Master, could it be Tang Su who ordered this? Sun Mingwei asked. Song Wanqing shook her head and glanced at Chu Li. Chu Li said, Tang Su is desperate to get rid of me, and if he wants to get rid of me, he must get rid of the saint first. In order to affect the saint, Senior Song's safety is also very important. I think this is all Tang Su's doing. It seems that Tang Su is more despicable than his father. Song Wanqing scoffed. Chu Li nodded slowly. Song Wanqing asked, Do you have a way to deal with it? Chu Li shook his head. An enlightened master is too difficult to deal with. The last time he killed Tang Haoyan, it was due to his carelessness and luck. This time, he won't be able to kill Tang Su. Moreover, Tang Su is so cautious, it's even more impossible. If he can't kill him, then it'll be troublesome. Song Wanqing frowned. Fortunately, he's an enlightened master, so he can't attack grandmasters. Otherwise, he would have killed you long ago. Chu Li nodded slowly. He suddenly understood why Tang Su had not come to him. It was not because he had not realized that he could kill him directly, but because he was bound by the heavenly rule. Tang Su was looking for a sure kill opportunity to get rid of him once and for all. Huh! Suddenly, a burst of laughter was heard. Chu Li looked up, and his expression changed. Song Wanqing and Sun Mingyue's expressions changed as well. Tang Su, dressed in a bright yellow robe, descended and looked at the three of them with a smile on his face. Song Wanqing gritted her teeth. Surname Tang, it was really you. Tang Su shook his head and sighed. I didn't expect Leader Song to be so powerful, to be able to escape an attack from the Chakram Pagoda. Moreover, you're so lucky to be able to survive. Congratulations. Chu Li frowned, and his thoughts turned quickly. Suddenly, he shouted, Water! Sun Mingyue pulled Song Wanqing and leaped into the pool. Tang Su slammed his palm down in the air. Chu Li leaped up to meet the palm. Bang! He only felt a vast and tyrannical force pressing down on him, like a mountain pressing down on him, wanting to directly crush him into meat paste. He couldn't resist at all, and he couldn't help but be shocked. It seemed like Tang Su had become stronger. I'm finally free now. Tang Su laughed heartily. Can't wait any longer. Chu Li fell like a meteor, instantly hitting the pool and diving into the water. Chapter 1542. P.S. The 45th Alliance leader has been born. Alliance leader Lucky Mosquito. Tang Su was going all out this time, so he must have made ample preparations. He knew that the evil Nether Dragon was here, and he also knew that he and the evil Nether Dragon were powerful enough to kill Tang Haoyan. He still dared to come, so he must have something up his sleeves. His cultivation level was powerful, but he probably had other tricks up his sleeves. Bang! Song Wanqing leaped out of the pool and faced the falling Tang Su. The two exchanged palms in the air, then flew out diagonally and landed on opposite sides of the pool, facing each other from a distance. Senior Song, are you determined to help Chu Li? Tang Su smiled and shook his head. It's a pity that Senior Song is heavily injured and hasn't recovered, so you can't stop me. Tang Su, you're crazy. Song Wanqing shouted. As an enlightened master, you can't attack grandmasters. Aren't you afraid of heavenly punishment? Tang Su laughed. Who said I broke the rules? Chu Li killed my brother, so I can't take revenge? This doesn't break the rules, right? Song Wanqing's expression changed slightly. She almost forgot about this. Chu Li also killed Tang Haoyan, and his father's death was absolutely irreconcilable. Even an enlightened master could kill Chu Li to take revenge, and it didn't break the rules. Tang Su smiled. Besides, there's still you. If I send you back to heaven, it won't break the rules, right? What are you trying to do? Song Wanqing scoffed. You were the one who instructed Monk Luan Ming, right? That's a misunderstanding. Tang Su shook his head and smiled. Monk Luan Ming wants to take advantage of the situation and found a good opportunity. Who asked your Li dynasty to offend our Fu dynasty? Song Wanqing took a deep breath and calmed down. Then let me experience your skills and see how much stronger you are compared to your father. Sure. Tang Su smiled. I also want to know how much stronger I am compared to my father. After saying that, he flew around the pool, avoiding the top of the pool. Sun Mingyue and Chu Li flew out of the pool and stood beside Song Wanqing. Chu Li's gaze was fixed on Tang Su's waist. There was an old, brightly colored sword hanging there. It didn't look sharp at all, and he didn't feel any danger from it. It seemed to be just an ordinary long sword hanging at his waist for decoration. Chu Li, on the other hand, felt that things were not so simple. This was because even after he used the omniscient mirror to observe the sword, he could not see through it. It was definitely not an ordinary treasure sword that could block the omniscient mirror's observation. However, he did not sense any danger from such a treasure sword. This was the self-concealment of a divine object, which showed how extraordinary this sword was. Since Tang Su dared to come to 10 Absolute Valley to fight against him and the evil Nether Dragon, he must have a trump card. To be able to deal with the evil Nether Dragon, there was a treasured sword. Chu Li knew that this sword could probably pose a threat to the evil Nether Dragon. It was even more dangerous than the Crouching Tiger divine sword. Since that was the case, he didn't want the evil nether dragon to come out again. If it really was killed by this sword, then all his previous efforts would have been for naught, and he wouldn't be able to keep his life. Song Wanqing said, "What are you two doing? Let's go first." "Master, let's join forces," Sun Mingwei said. Chu Li nodded. "Senior, you've yet to recover from your injuries. You're no match for him. It's better if we work together. Even if I'm not seriously injured, I'm still not his match. I can only run for my life. You guys go first." Song Wanqing snorted. Sun Mingwei shook her head. Chu Li stretched out his hand, and Sun Mingwei placed her lily-white hand in his. Suddenly, their auras flowed, and they were connected. The rich aura of the Supreme Diamond Supreme scripture nourished their bodies, and they gradually reached their peak state. Chu Li said in a low voice, "Your Majesty, why did you come only now?" "There's no harm in telling you," Tang Su said with a smile. "Chu Li, you missed the best time to make your move. I haven't been able to completely digest the enlightened master's power a while ago, so I was clumsy and couldn't use 80% of my abilities." Chu Li smiled and shook his head. "I don't believe you," Tang Su said. "Before Father ascended to heaven, he imparted a large amount of cultivation to me. I was almost torn apart by this cultivation and my body exploded. Fortunately, the enlightened master's power descended in time and saved my life." Chu Li frowned and glanced at Song Wanqing. Song Wanqing sneered. "Tang Haoyin is really ruthless." Chu Li looked at her thoughtfully. Song Wanqing said, "Before ascending to heaven, he imparted his cultivation to others, leaving him with nothing. When he steps into the Grandmaster's boundary, he will also have nothing and will need to cultivate again. It won't be easy. The Grandmaster's boundary isn't the paradise on earth that people think it is. It stands aloof from worldly affairs." Tang Su sighed and nodded. "Yes, Father's obsession is too strong. It's his fault for being so sullen when he ascended to heaven. If he doesn't get his revenge, he won't be able to sleep peacefully even if he ascends to the Grandmaster's boundary." Chu Li smiled. "You're really ruthless. Sai, in order to let Father sleep well in the Grandmaster's boundary, I will kill you no matter what." Tang Su shook his head and acted helpless. "Why are you struggling for nothing?" Chu Li smiled. "Your Majesty, your words are ridiculous. Since I've sent your father to heaven, I'll send you up as well. Let the two of you be reunited. That will depend on your ability. If you can send me to heaven, I have nothing to say." Tang Su smiled. The four of them chatted as they walked and finally bumped into each other. Tang Su sent out a palm each. One palm was aimed at Chu Li, while the other was aimed at Song Wanqing. Chu Li and Sun Mingwei each went forward and blocked the two palms. Bang, bang. The two of them fluttered backward. Their expressions changed slightly as they looked at Tang Su in surprise. Tang Su stood steadily on the grass and sized him up with a smile. Then he sent out a palm toward Song Wanqing, who was flying toward him. Bang, 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 bang. Song Wanqing took 2 steps back and pounced forward again. Bang, 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 bang. A deafening explosion came from the ravine. The four of them fought. Chu Li and Sun Mingwei joined forces. Their power was no different from an enlightened master. Song Wanqing was also an enlightened master. However, the three of them together could not suppress Tang Su. Tang Su's bright yellow robe fluttered in the wind. He was confident and calm. The more he fought, the stronger he became. His cultivation level seemed to be gradually merging with the three of them and slowly becoming stronger. If this went on, the three of them would definitely lose. Song Wanqing said, "Mingwei, you guys leave first." Sun Mingwei hurriedly said, "Master, you mustn't." She knew that Song Wanqing was going to use her secret skill. She had yet to recover from her serious injuries and had already used a secret skill that could stimulate her potential. If she used it again, she would definitely die. Chu Li said, "Senior Song, you go first. We'll hold them off for a while and then meet up with Senior." "Master, you go first. We can hold them off." Sun Mingwei hurriedly shouted. Song Wanqing glanced at the smiling Tang Su, gritted her teeth, and disappeared in a flash. Sun Mingwei smiled. Chu Li also heaved a sigh of relief. He could tell that Song Wanqing was already at the end of her tether. If she continued to persevere, Tang Su wouldn't even need to deal a heavy blow. Her injuries would relapse, and she would directly ascend to the heavens. However, under such circumstances, an ordinary person would not be able to abandon the two juniors and run away first. Song Wanqing's actions were truly bold. Not only did he not look down on her, he even praised her. Tang Su smiled and said, "Senior Song, you don't even care about your face for the sake of your life." However, he felt a chill in his heart. What a difficult woman. "Shut up," Sun Mingwei shouted. Tang Su said, "Chu Li, you guys can escape too. I won't stop you." Chu Li's face darkened, and he did not say anything. Chapter 1543. Chu Li sighed. Tang Su had indeed found a way to restrain the evil dark dragon. Tang Su grinned. "Don't worry, I won't do anything to this dragon. I still need to study it." Chu Li sneered. He felt that Tang Su was more difficult to deal with. As an enlightened master and the emperor, he did not have the slightest self-awareness. He did not even blush when he lied. If it were someone else, they would have been deceived. Sun Mingwei turned to look at Chu Li. Chu Li shook his head. Sun Mingwei nodded. The two had instantly exchanged ideas. Sun Mingwei asked if they should leave first to lure Tang Su away so that he would not threaten the evil dark dragon. Chu Li meant that they should not leave or the evil dark dragon would suffer. Sun Mingwei nodded to show that she understood and listened to him. Tang Su chuckled. "Look at the two of you. One of you is a saint, while the other is the head chief of the imperial residence. You're completely unrelated to each other. So how did you end up together? It looks like you're quite close to each other. Chu Li, you're quite lucky with women." Chu Li said, "Your Majesty, you don't have to worry about it." Tang Su said, "You married two ladies from the High Duke's public house and have an ambiguous relationship with the saint of the Holy Church of Light. I'm really envious of your luck with women. Although I have many beauties in my harem, they can't compare to the saint." Sun Mingwei pursed her lips and did not say a word. Chu Li was furious when he heard this, but his expression remained calm. "I wonder how your father feels after hearing His Majesty's words. As his son, instead of thinking about avenging him, he only cares about his beauty. What an unfilial son," he said faintly. "Shut up." Tang Su stopped smiling. Chu Li smiled. Moreover, as an enlightened master and the Fu dynasty's emperor, he can't do anything to a mere grandmaster like me after so long. Isn't it embarrassing for him? Isn't it embarrassing for both you and your father? When you ascend to heaven, will your Majesty still have the face to see him? You have a sharp tongue." Tang Su sneered. "I wanted to give you a quick death, but it seems like I can't let you go. Don't worry, I won't kill you right away. I'll make sure you don't die." Chu Li smiled. "How arrogant. Does your Majesty think you can defeat my master?" "Zhou Dunli," Tang Su said coldly. "Although he is powerful, he might not be my opponent. I am the strongest heavenly god in the world." With an arrogant look on his face, he snorted and said, "Otherwise, what's the point of father's sacrifice?" Chu Li shook his head. "Your father's sacrifice may not be meaningful. Even if you could defeat my master, can you defeat that dragon?" Tang Su snorted and said, "You'll know when the time comes. It's fine if you kill me, but if you capture me and want to torture me, you'll have to think about my master's methods." Chu Li smiled. He could see the fear in his heart. Tang Su snorted. "Surnamed Chu, don't you find it embarrassing to say all this? Especially in front of the saintess, you're relying on Zhou Dunli's influence. It's simply disgusting." Chu Li laughed out loud. "Isn't His Majesty the same? If not for your father sacrificing his cultivation, would your Majesty have the guts to appear before me? I was so scared that I pissed my pants." "Shut up," Tang Su shouted. Initially, he wanted to break their fighting spirit. After all, if they were to fight with their lives on the line, the final blow was the most terrifying. However, he did not expect Chu Li's words to be as sharp as swords. Every word he said pierced his heart and angered him instead. He dashed toward the two at lightning speed, and his palm energy was like a mountain, forcing them to retreat. Bang! The two flew backward and spat out a mouthful of blood in the air. Tang Su dashed over and caught up to them again before he continued to attack. Bang! The two flew back in the air and spat out another mouthful of blood. Tang Su attacked again. Chu Li and Sun Mingwei suddenly disappeared and reappeared behind Tang Su in the next moment. Then, Chu Li reached out to grab the long sword at his waist. Tang Su's reaction was incredibly fast. He turned his body sideways to avoid Chu Li's hand and attacked at the same time. Bang! Sun Mingwei blocked the attack and spat out a mouthful of blood. The two fluttered backward. Chu Li sighed helplessly. The next moment, the two disappear at the same time. He initially wanted to use this as his trump card. After he cultivated the Heavenly Star Void Insight skill, he would be able to break through the formation space and be unrestrained in the 10 Absolute Vitality Ceiling Formation. Then, he would be able to use the Imminent Skyline and God's Limbs. Unfortunately, Tang Su's reaction was too fast. He managed to dodge the attack and did not manage to snatch his treasure sword. If they continued to fight, neither Sun Mingwei nor he would be able to withstand it, so he could only send her away. Sun Mingwei appeared in the Divine Light Basilica of the Great Light Peak. You. She reached out to hold Chu Li's large hand. Chu Li shook his head. I have to go back. It's too dangerous. Sun Mingwei frowned and wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth. Forget it, Chu Li said. It's too dangerous over there with the evil nether dragon. I have to join forces with it. If that doesn't work, I'll move away too. Sun Mingwei let go of his hand and nodded gently. Chu Li could leave 10 Absolute Valley directly. This was something she could not do, and neither could Tang Su. This was a huge advantage. He could escape at a critical moment, and the danger was not that high. Chu Li smiled. It's okay. I'm very lucky. Besides, he can't kill me. All right, you have to be careful. Don't force yourself. Sun Mingwei sighed. After she finished speaking, she quickly shut her mouth. This was not like what she would say. It was too green. Charge. Chu Li smiled and suddenly disappeared. The next moment, he appeared in 10 Absolute Valley. If Tang Su was a person who valued friendship, he would not have appeared in 10 Absolute Valley. He would have directly appeared in the Fu Dynasty's Imperial House to deal with his son. However, through the previous conversation, he knew that Tang Su was extremely selfish and cold-blooded. Even if he killed his children now, he might not be able to force him to stop. Tang Su had already jumped into the pool. Chu Li entered the pool and saw that he and the evil nether dragon were approaching. The evil nether dragon swam toward him and opened its mouth to threaten him. Chu Li's figure flashed, but he realized that he could not break through the space in the pool. There was indeed something strange about this pool. Not only was there a 10 Absolute Vitality Ceiling Formation, but there were also other formations and treasures to suppress the space. He had no choice but to swim faster and hit Tang Su with his palm from afar. Tang Su dodged it easily. He did not even look at him and pulled out a long sword from his waist. He saw the true appearance of the long sword. At first glance, it looked like an old verdant-tipped sword. Even the blade was rusted. It looked like it was about to be scrapped and could not withstand a single blow. Tang Su suddenly stabbed his heart with the sword. Chu Li was stunned. The tip of the sword pierced through his heart. Tang Su did not move an inch like a statue. Chu Li could not care about anything else. He felt that this was a good opportunity and struck out with his palm. However, when the palm energy reached him, it was dissipated by an invisible force. Tang Su was still motionless. Chu Li desperately swam over to take his life. Although this was unusual, he could not miss it. His figure suddenly stopped. A dragon's roar rang in his ears and went straight into his mind. His blood surged. Tang Su pulled out his sword. The wound was deep, but no blood flowed out. Chapter 1544. Chu Li felt a chill down his spine. Suddenly, a paragraph of text appeared in his mind. He suddenly knew what kind of sword it was. The dragon slaying sword. He used the blood of his heart as a sacrifice to the sword. Every time he attacked, he would use the blood of his heart as a sacrifice to the sword. There was nothing that it could not overcome. Even the toughest dragon skin in the world could not stop it. He had once killed a dragon. This was a true dragon, not something with a thin dragon vein like the evil dark dragon. He desperately swam toward the evil dark dragon to stop it from approaching and take it away. In front of the dragon's slaying sword, the evil nether dragon could not withstand a single blow. The evil dark dragon seemed to sense danger and slowly retreated. Tang Su suddenly smiled at Chu Li. At this time, Chu Li had already swam in front of the evil dark dragon and blocked it. He faced Tang Su and desperately tried to think a way to break out of it. He knew that the dragon Salyer had a weakness, and that was that it could only unleash 3 strikes. Since the 3 swords had been unleashed, if they could not accomplish anything, they would lose their power. This was also the reason why the dragon slaughtering sword could exist. Otherwise, how could such a powerful treasured sword exist in this world? It would have been destroyed a long time ago. Right now, he had to think of a way to block the 3 swords. As long as he could withstand these 3 swords, after the dragon slaughtering sword lost its power, even though Tang Su was strong, he and the evil nether dragon might not be able to fight back. Even if they could not win, they could still retreat unscathed. Tang Su glided toward Chu Li. Chu Li went forward and threw a punch from afar. Tang Su didn't even try to dodge. He met it with a palm strike. Bang! Chu Li was sent flying and crashed into the evil dark dragon. The evil dark dragon gently flicked its tail and crawled under him, carrying him on its back. They had already formed a tacit understanding and needed Chu Li to activate the dragon taming technique to command it to fight. Helpless, Chu Li placed his palm on the evil dark dragon's back and activated the dragon taming technique. The dragon control art's internal energy entered the evil dark dragon's body, and they could sense each other's thoughts. There was only one thought in Chu Li's mind, Run. It had to avoid that sword, a sword that could endanger its life. Although the evil dark dragon did not understand, it silently slid away much faster than Tang Su. In the blink of an eye, the dragon and the man had traveled 100 feet. Tang Su gritted his teeth and threw. The dragon Salyer turned into a ray of lightning and instantly arrived behind the evil dragon. Chu Li saw that the situation was not good. The evil dark dragon had no time to dodge, so he could only meet it with a palm strike. Chi! The dragon Salyer suddenly turned and instantly pierced through his palm, and at the same time pierced through his heart. Chu Li thought to himself, so fast, so fast. Following that, endless darkness surged up. He hurriedly clenched his teeth and extracted spiritual energy from the sky beyond heaven to mend his chest. But the sword energy contained in the dragon's slaying sword was strange. It suddenly exploded, and his heart immediately shattered. The evil dark dragon saw Chu Li meet the long sword, and then the long sword pierced through his body. Then it could no longer sense his existence, so it knew that he was dead. It instantly became furious. It was as smart as a human being. If it wasn't for the fact that it had stayed in the Valley of 10 Extremes for too long and had become extremely naive, it might even be smarter than a human being. Seeing that Chu Li had died because of it, it angrily rushed towards Tang Su, no longer caring about the threat of the treasured sword. Tang Su hurriedly avoided it and went to catch the dragon-slaying sword. The evil dark dragon chased after him in a frenzy, waving its claws with all its might. Tang Su was suddenly slashed by a claw, and a long gash appeared on his shoulder. His bones were exposed, and blood gushed out like a fountain. However, he caught the dragon Salyer and turned around to stab. The evil dark dragon's heart was stabbed, and it instantly froze. The sword energy on the dragon's slaying sword instantly exploded its heart. The evil dark dragon's vitality was extremely tyrannical. Its heart was shattered, and blood began to gush out of its mouth. But it became even more furious. It fiercely swung its claws, and Tang Su's left arm was slashed, almost leaving his body. Only a layer of skin and flesh prevented his arm from falling. In this situation, Tang Su still hadn't let go of the dragon-slaying sword. His body suddenly lit up, and holding the long sword, he turned into a beam of light and shot out, disappearing beside the evil dark dragon in the blink of an eye. The evil dark dragon chased for 100 feet before stopping. More and more blood gushed out of its mouth, and blood also began to gush out of its heart. The fresh blood dyed the pool red. Its body was huge, and the blood seemed to flow endlessly, spreading in the pool. It came to Chu Li's side, and seeing that Chu Li kept falling, it hurriedly dived down and carried him to its cave. Its movements were slow and gentle, afraid that Chu Li, who was stuck on its back, would fall. However, halfway there, it no longer had the strength to move. Its body slowly sank, and it used all its strength to open its eyes. It desperately moved forward and finally arrived at the cave. At this time, its blood had already flowed dry. Song Wanqing returned to the Great Light Peak, took a bottle of spirit pills, and desperately urged her inner energy to heal her injuries. The spirit pills were ineffective in the 10 Absolute Valley, but they had a miraculous effect here, and her injuries quickly recovered. Soon after, she realized that Sun Mingyue had also returned and came to her small courtyard. Sun Mingyue waited outside the small courtyard, not daring to disturb her, knowing that her master was inside recuperating. After a while, Song Wanqing opened her eyes and said, "Come in." Sun Mingyue entered the small courtyard and came to her bedroom. She looked at her carefully. "Master, are your injuries all right? I still can't ascend to heaven." Song Wanqing said, "I was afraid that I would directly ascend to heaven just now, so I didn't have the time to properly warn you about some key things." Sun Mingyue said, "Master, I want to go back and take a look. Is Chu Li still entangled with Tang Su?" "Yes." Song Wanqing shook her head and said, "We didn't find the wrong person, unfortunately." When she thought that after Sun Mingyue became an enlightened master, the two of them would definitely be separated, and she faintly felt that it was a pity. Once the two of them were separated, her disciple would definitely be alone for the rest of her life. Which man in the world could compare to Chu Li? With Chu Li in front of her, how could she look at other men? Sun Mingyue said, "Master, continue to recuperate. I'll go take a look and be back soon." "Forget it. I'll go with you." Song Wanqing said, "I'm much better now. I can still make a move." "Master." Sun Mingyue felt a little guilty. Song Wanqing snorted. "Young? Gather?" Glycoside mulberry, the two girls suddenly flashed. In the next moment, they appeared at the peak of the mountain above the valley of 10 extremes. Then, they floated down, and, as they descended, they saw Tang Su soaring up like a ray of light. Tang Su's body was stained with blood, his speed was as fast as lightning, and his face was pale. When he saw the two girls appear, he only smiled and flew away without stopping. Song Wanqing's heart skipped a beat. This was a good opportunity to kill Tang Su. Unfortunately, Tang Su's speed was too fast. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared without a trace. Who knew where he would hide? It was impossible to find him. He could only shake his head regretfully and continue to descend with Sun Mingyue, arriving at the edge of the pool that was dyed red. Sun Mingyue's expression changed drastically. She jumped down without hesitation, and Song Wanqing also jumped into the pool. The two girls searched the pool that was dyed red, but they didn't find Chu Li and the evil underworld dragon. Thus, they came to the cave and saw Chu Li and the evil underworld dragon. The evil underworld dragon was lying on the ground motionlessly, without any signs of life. Chu Li was lying on the evil underworld dragon's back, also motionless, without any signs of life. Sun Mingyue hurriedly went forward to check. Chu Li was already dead. His chest was badly mutilated, and a hole appeared. Song Wanqing shook her head. She didn't expect Chu Li to actually fall. What a pity. Sun Mingyue activated the supreme Vajra scripture and injected it into Chu Li's body, but there was no reaction. Song Wanqing sighed. "Mingyue, don't waste your energy. He's already gone." Chapter 1545. Song Wanqing knew that her disciple could not accept this. How could such a powerful person die so easily? It was truly unimaginable. In his disciple's heart, he must have felt that Chu Li could become an enlightened master. She shook her head and sighed. He's already breathed his last. Even a panacea wouldn't be able to save him. His injuries are too severe. His heart was torn to shreds. Even the great G spirit blessing pill could not save him. He could only say that he was unlucky to have fallen in front of the gates of the enlightened master. This was fate. It could not be grasped. It left one at a loss. Sun Minghua shook her head and said, "He won't die so easily. He can still come back to life." She did not believe it and desperately channeled her energy into the supreme titanium scripture. Unfortunately, Chu Li's body was like a bottomless pit, and there was no reaction at all. The rich energy that was channeled in his body did not respond at all, but she did not stop until she had channeled all of the supreme titanium scripture's inner energy into his body, leaving nothing behind. Puff! Chu Li suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Chu Li, Sun Minghua was elated. Song Wanqing was surprised. She didn't expect that she would really be able to save him. Chu Li slowly opened his eyes and smiled. Has Tang Su left? He escaped. Sun Minghua nodded vigorously. How are you? Chu Li shook his head. It's not looking good. His eyes shone brightly. Song Wanqing's heart sank when she saw this. She shook her head again. This was the final radiance of a setting sun. He was definitely going to die. Sun Minghua hurriedly said, "How can you die so easily? What happened to your previous divine skills?" Chu Li smiled. "All right, I'll try. Help me sit across from the evil dark dragon." Sun Minghua gently lifted him up. With Song Wanqing's help, the two women gently placed him in front of the evil underworld dragon. Chu Li glanced at the dead evil dark dragon, shook his head, and sighed. "It's my fault for dragging it into this." "What are you talking about? What do you want?" Sun Minghua asked. Chu Li shook his head. "I'll give it a try." His hands formed a strange seal and slowly pressed it against the evil dark dragon's forehead. Then he stopped moving, his body motionless. The smile on his face was still there, but he was no longer breathing. "Chu Li," Sun Minghua quickly called out. Song Wanqing sighed and said, "This time, it can be considered to be completely." Sun Minghua turned her head and said, "Master, he won't die that easily." Song Wanqing nodded along with her. Yes, he might come back alive. Sun Minghua nodded. She firmly believed in this. Chu Li had died twice in front of her, and each time, he would come back alive. He must have cultivated some kind of mystical technique that could turn the dead back to life. This time would not be an exception, even though his injuries were too severe. She thought for a moment and took out the porcelain bottle from her pocket. She shook her head helplessly and put it down. No matter how powerful the spirit medicine was, it would lose its effect here. Time slowly passed. Chu Li and the evil nether dragon were motionless like statues. Sun Minghua and Song Wanqing stood guard at the side. A day passed. On the morning of the second day, Song Wanqing sighed and said, "Little girl, don't wait any longer. Let them rest in peace." Sun Minghua shook her head and said, "They're not dead. Let's wait a little longer. Master, go back and heal your wounds first. I'll be fine here." "You." Song Wanqing shook her head. She turned around and floated out to find some food before returning to guard Chu Li and the evil dark dragon. The hand seal that Chu Li displayed could communicate with the soul and was imparted from the earth matrix and reincarnation scripture. As his cultivation level improved, so did the earth matrix and reincarnation scripture. He had unknowingly comprehended some abilities that he did not usually use, but they came in handy at critical times. Boom! There was a loud bang in his mind, and a bright light suddenly appeared. The light slowly dissipated, and an evil dark dragon appeared. It was no different from the real evil dark dragon, and its size was the same as well. It floated in the void of his mind and widened its eyes curiously, looking left and right. The Buddha and demon in the void of Chu Li's mind were all his own faces. When it saw these, it instantly revealed a joyful expression. A giant tower appeared in the void of Chu Li's mind. There was a wall painting inside the tower, which was the pattern that he had seen from Monk Shan. It appeared through his own imagination and formed this wheel tower. The wheel tower enveloped it. Its body was huge, but in front of the wheel tower, it was like an ant in front of a giant elephant. After entering the tower, it quickly looked around and examined these murals over and over again. Time passed slowly. When Chu Li's mind moved and the wheel tower disappeared, The evil dark dragon had already changed. It was so clear that it was no different from the real thing. Its whole body emitted a sparkling light as if it was made of colored glass. Boom! There was a loud bang, and a bolt of lightning suddenly burst out from the void of Chu Li's mind and struck its body. It disappeared in a flash and then returned to its original body. The evil dark dragon only felt a bang in its mind, and then a myriad of thoughts appeared in its mind. It recalled everything that it had experienced in the void of Chu Li's mind, and an inexplicable realization surged. A pure and refined aura appeared out of nowhere, and the aura that had been severed was restored again. It carried Chu Li out of the cave slowly. Sun Mingwei and Song Wanqing widened their eyes and did not stop it. They watched as it went out into the red pool outside. The blood that flowed out from the dragon and the human blended into the pool and was absorbed by the pool. It could not solidify, and the pool was dyed red. The turbulent pool water pressed toward Chu Li and the evil dark dragon. Sun Mingwei and Song Wanqing felt that something was wrong and quickly retreated into the cave to watch. A whirlpool formed around the dragon and the human, and all the surrounding pool water was pressed toward them. The red pool water, in particular, had already returned to its original clarity when it passed by the two of them, and there was no longer any red. An hour later, the water in the pond calmed down and returned to its original clear and transparent state, no longer having the hint of redness. Chu Li lay on the evil dark dragon's body and slowly opened his eyes. His eyes shot out 2 rays of white light, shooting out more than 10 feet in the water. The evil dark dragon did the same, its gaze shooting out like lightning. Sun Mingwei and Song Wanqing had already noticed the changes in the evil dark dragon. It had become more slender. Sun Mingwei estimated that the evil dark dragon had grown about 1 meter, and it looked more and more like a dragon. Compared to the evil dark dragon she had seen at the beginning, it seemed like a completely different dragon. Whether it was its body or head, they had all changed. Its head was still fierce and frightening, but there was a hint of majesty in it. Song Wanqing looked at the dragon and the human in astonishment, looking at their chests in amazement. Chu Li and the evil dark dragon's chests had both recovered to their original state, and there were no visible scars. Even the best spirit medicine would not have such a miraculous effect. The speed of their recovery was truly admirable. She did not know what had happened to the dragon and the human. Chu Li smiled and patted the evil dark dragon. The increasingly dense and pure dragon taming technique's aura entered its body, and he felt its body becoming stronger. He had finally stepped into the 7th level of the dragon taming technique. He wanted to raise his head to the sky and roar, unable to suppress his excitement. This time, it was a blessing in disguise. The evil dark dragon had used the Chakram Pagoda to comprehend the secret of life and death, forcibly strengthening its soul by several times. In this way, it would not be difficult for the dragon taming technique to step into the 8th level, and it would be much easier than stepping into the 7th level this time. At the 8th level, no matter how difficult the 9th level was, it was only 1 level away. With victory in sight, it would have even more fighting spirit. The evil dark dragon silently came to the cave, and Chu Li floated and landed in front of the 2 women. Sun Mingwei pursed her lips and smiled. "You really can't die." Chu Li chuckled. "How can I die so easily?" Song Wanqing sighed. "It was really dangerous this time." What exactly happened? Chapter 1546. Chu Li asked, "Senior, do you know about the dragon-slaying sword?" "I'm not too sure, but I have a rough idea. It's a legend." Song Wanqing sighed. It said that this sword can only be used as a blood sacrifice. Once it's used, the owner of the sword will become extremely weak. Moreover, it can only be used 3 times. If it can't be used 3 times, it's no different from a useless sword. 3 times? Sun Mingwei asked. All I have to do is avoid 3 moves. Yes. Song Wanqing nodded. Sun Mingwei said, "That's not too difficult to deal with." "It's not that easy." Song Wanqing said, "The power of the dragon-slaying sword is not only because it is incomparably sharp and unstoppable, but also because of the sword energy it contains, which can make the person wielding the sword faster and more powerful. Just the word fast is enough to make almost no one able to dodge it. It is said that not only can it pierce through all the hardest things, it can also pierce through space. It's very fast. Chuli nodded. If not for the dragon-slaying sword's speed, he would not have been unable to avoid the sword that was aimed at his heart. Isn't that invincible? Song Wanqing frowned. Song Wanqing said, how can there be invincible? Martial arts can't do it, enlightened masters can't do it, and the dragon-slaying sword can't do it either. What's its weakness? Sun Mingwei asked. Song Wanqing pondered. It's said that there's a treasure sword that can rival it and block it. Unfortunately, I've never heard what sword it is. After all, it's something from a long time ago and hasn't appeared in the world for a long time. Sun Mingwei looked at Chuli. Song Wanqing said, "Oh right, Chuli, you can ask your master. He's the master of Goddess Attraction Mountain. He might know." Chuli nodded. Sun Mingwei said, "Do you want to deal with Tang Su? While he's weak." Chuli sighed and shook his head. "I'm not confident that I can block the dragon-slaying sword. I have to return to Goddess Attraction Mountain and ask my master." "All right," Sun Mingwei said. Song Wanqing smiled. "Come to Great Light Peak when you have time. You have to help Mingwei." "Yes." Chuli felt inexplicably guilty from her smile, so he bit the bullet and agreed. Song Wanqing tugged at Sun Mingwei. "We should head back too. The Great Light Peak can't be empty forever." "Great." Mingwei nodded and said goodbye to Chuli. As Chuli watched them leave, he turned around and patted the evil dark dragon's head. Now, he did not need the dragon taming technique to connect them. The two of them could communicate telepathically and know each other's thoughts. He waved his hand and suddenly disappeared. In the next moment, he appeared in front of the bronze bell on Goddess Attraction Mountain. He gently struck the bronze bell. The sun was shining brightly in the middle of the sky, and the entire Immortal Attraction Mountain was refreshing and pleasant. Dong Jianxin appeared again. He walked over and looked at him seriously. "Junior Martial Brother, why did you ring the bell again?" Chuli looked embarrassed. "I still have something to ask, Master. If you have something to say, ask me first. If I don't know, it's not too late to ask Master. Master is in seclusion, and it's not good to always disturb him," Dong Jianxin said seriously. Chuli gave a fist salute and agreed. "Tell me, what's the matter?" Dong Jian asked. Chuli said, "Senior brother, do you know about the dragon-slaying sword?" "The dragon-slaying sword." Dong Jianxin thought for a moment, touched his chin, and said, "I seem to have heard of it. Why did you mention the dragon-slaying sword? It has long been lost and has not appeared for a long time. Could it be that it has appeared again?" Chuli nodded. "The Fu Dynasty's Emperor, Tang Su, used the dragon-slaying sword to kill me." "Tang Su obtained the dragon-slaying sword?" Dong Jianxin's expression changed slightly. Chuli said, "It was not originally in the hands of the Fu Dynasty. He had always suspected that the dragon-slaying sword had always been in the Fu Dynasty's imperial house, but it was not taken out earlier. Tang Haoyan thought that the crouching tiger divine sword was enough to kill the evil dark dragon, but he did not expect it to be killed by him. It's definitely not in the hands of the Fu Dynasty." Dong Jianxin shook his head. "If it really is in the hands of the Fu Dynasty, we will know." Chuli nodded. "Now that it is in Tang Su's hands, its power is indeed amazing. I was almost killed. Senior Martial Brother, do you know a way to restrain the dragon-slaying sword?" "If you want to restrain the dragon-slaying sword, then the heaven-killing sword is the only one," Dong Jianxin said. Chuli's spirit was lifted. He smiled. "There really is a way to restrain the dragon-slaying sword?" "Of course. In this world, everything has a counter. How can there be an invincible thing?" Dong Jianxin said snappily. "Don't you understand this? I just didn't expect the dragon-slaying sword to be so powerful that it can be restrained." Chuli smiled. "Where is the heaven-killing sword? Senior Martial Brother, do you know?" "I know." Dong Jianxin nodded. Chuli looked at him with a smile. Dong Jianxin scoffed. "The heaven-killing sword is in our Goddess Attraction Mountain." Chuli was surprised. Dong Jianxin said proudly, "Our Goddess Attraction Mountain is not as simple as you think. There are only a few people, and it seems ordinary. In fact, there are many good things that you have never seen before. Chu Li smiled. Were they? Dong Jianxin smiled. You can't know yet. Chu Li revealed a puzzled expression. Dong Jianxin said, You will know when you become the mountain master. Right now, it is still too early. Then how does senior martial brother know? I only know a little. Dong Jianxin shook his head. It is far from enough. If you want to obtain the heaven-killing sword, you need to ask Master. Will Master agree? Chu Li smiled. He had always had the impression that Master Zhou Dunley was extremely good to him and would grant almost all of his requests. Not necessarily. Dong Jianxin said, This sword is ominous. It will devour its master. Chu Li frowned. Could it be that I can only watch Tang Su strut around and become invincible? Dong Jianxin's face darkened. He sneered. If he wants to be invincible, what is our goddess attraction mountain? Chu Li said, I know that before Tang Haoyan ascended to the heavens, he transferred his cultivation level to Tang Su, and that's how Tang Su became an enlightened master. That's why he's extremely powerful as an enlightened master, much more powerful than Tang Haoyan. Tang Haoyan. Dong Jianxin frowned and gritted his teeth. He said hatefully, How ruthless. Chu Li said, Tang Su was already powerful. Now that he has the dragon-slaying sword, he is really unscrupulous. Master will not attack him. After all, he is a generation away. Dong Jianxin frowned. But the heaven-killing sword. As the two were talking, a dragon's roar came from the sky. Then, the golden dragon appeared. Zhou Dunley floated down from the golden dragon and landed in front of the two. He smiled and looked at the two. What are you two brothers talking about? Master, we are talking about the heaven-killing sword. Dong Jianxin smiled. Heaven-killing sword? Zhou Dunley looked at Chu Li. He shook his head and sighed. This sword is inauspicious. It is not suitable for it to appear. But Master, the dragon-slaying sword has already appeared. It is in Tang Su's hands. He almost killed Junior Chu. Dong Jianxin hurriedly said. Zhou Dunley frowned slightly. Chu Li hurriedly nodded. That's right, this sword is truly vicious. Tang Su stabbed himself in the chest first. I thought he was going to do something, but he immediately pulled out the dragon-slaying sword and almost killed me. If it weren't for my luck, I would have died by now. Sigh. Zhou Dunley sighed. He looked up at the clouds in the sky. He was in a trance and fell into his memories. After a while, Zhou Dunley sighed. The heaven-killing sword will devour its owner. It can only be used once. If you want to unleash its power, you should first practice the heaven-killing 3 forms. Once you have mastered it, I will lend you the heaven-killing sword. Thank you, Master. Chu Li was overjoyed. Chapter 1547. Dong Jianxin looked at Chu Li with some sympathy. Zhou Dunley looked at Chu Li and praised. Your dragon-taming technique is really amazing. Chu Li nodded and smiled. I was almost killed by Tang Su, and the evil nether dragon was also killed by him with the dragon-slaying sword. If I hadn't cultivated the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture and pulled it along to comprehend this scripture, both of us wouldn't have survived. He was secretly snitching. Zhou Dunley frowned. He used the dragon's salure to kill you? Chu Li slowly nodded. It's indeed powerful, a sword that pierced through the heart. Zhou Dunley's expression darkened. He nodded slowly and said, He won Tang Haoyan's heart and became a heavenly god. His prestige is truly unparalleled. Looks like I have to have a good chat with him. Chu Li smiled. Master, you can't kill him, right? I can't. Zhou Dunley shook his head. But it's still possible to beat him until he's half crippled so that he won't have the guts to bother you again. Thank you, Master. Chu Li smiled. He wasn't stupid enough to not use a powerful backer. He needed enough time, and no matter what, he could not beat Tang Su. Even with Sun Mingyue and the evil Dark Dragon, they were not a match for Tang Su. If Tang Su came again, he would most likely die again. Moreover, if he learned his lesson and cut off his own head, he would not be able to live. Zhou Dunley said, Why didn't I sense that you were in danger? Since he had accepted Chu Li as his disciple, he naturally had a sense of Chu Li's whereabouts. If Chu Li was in danger, he would immediately appear to rescue him. However, he did not sense Chu Li's presence this time. It was truly strange. After Chu Li explained the situation in the 10 Ultimate Vitality Lock Valley, Zhou Dunli came to a sudden realization. He shook his head and sighed. It's fortunate that it's there. Otherwise, you guys wouldn't be a match for Tang Su. All right, I'll have a good talk with him. Chu Li said, Master, do you know that the Li dynasty and the Qiu dynasty are going to fight soon? Master cannot interfere in such matters. Zhou Dunli nodded and said, Our goddess attraction mountain does not interfere in worldly matters. This is the rule. Chu Li frowned. If that's the case, I can't interfere either? Yes, Zhou Dunli said. Chu Li thought for a while and asked, What if I attack from the shadows? You can't attack directly, Zhou Dunli said with a faint smile. Otherwise, you'll be punished by the sect rules. You'll have to go into seclusion for several years. Chu Li suddenly understood what he meant and smiled. Yes, I understand. He couldn't directly take action, but he could secretly control it. Zhou Dunli glanced at Dong Jianxin. Jianxin, take Chu Li to the sword gauntlet. Yes, master. Dong Jianxin cupped his fist and said. Zhou Dunli let out a long roar, and a golden dragon appeared in the sky. Zhou Dunli then floated onto the golden dragon and disappeared into the clouds. Dong Jianxin looked at Chu Li sympathetically and shook her head. Chu Li smiled. Why do you have such an expression, senior brother? You. Dong Jianxin shook his head. It's best if you don't use the heaven-slaughtering sword. Just let Master teach Tang Su a lesson. In the future, when you also become a god, it won't be too late to deal with him then. The future is long. Chu Li asked, Is the heaven regaining sword that difficult to deal with? An inauspicious sword, a sword that kills its master. Dong Jianxin sighed. Otherwise, why didn't Master let come out? He was afraid of trouble. Even if you can kill your enemy, you will lose yourself. What's the point? Chu Li smiled. If I want to deal with the dragon-slaying sword, I can only use it. I have no other choice. All right then. Dong Jianxin sighed. You have to be careful. You can only use the sword once. You must not use it a second time. Otherwise, you will die without a doubt. You may even go crazy and create endless killing. Chu Li nodded. Yes. Dong Jianxin turned and led him away from the bronze bell. They walked towards a building in the east. But it won't be easy for you to use the heaven-slaughtering sword. It won't be possible in a short period of time. You have to be prepared for isolated cultivation. Why? Chu Li asked curiously. Dong Jianxin brought him to a small building. It was quite exquisite, with flying eaves and hanging walls. It was antique and had a pentagonal shape with 5 floors. It seemed to be cast from a blue stone, but Chu Li's omniscient mirror found that it was made of a strange material. Even the omniscient mirror could not see through it. This greatly increased his interest. He smiled. This is the sword gauntlet? This building did not have a door. It was completely sealed. There was only a dent in the entire building. Yes. Dong Jianxin turned to look at him. He smiled. You can come in at any time. It's just that you've been hurrying outside. You don't have time to stay in Goddess Attraction Mountain to cultivate. Chu Li heard the reproach in his tone. He laughed and watched him take out his waist tag and stick it into the dent in the wall. Boom! There was a muffled sound. A door suddenly appeared in front of them. The stone door slowly opened, and a soft white light was emitted from inside. It was like the radiance of a luminous pearl. Let's go. Dong Jianxin took the lead and stepped into the tower. Chu Li followed. Suddenly, spiritual energy rushed into his pores. The spiritual energy in this tower was richer than outside. It was truly rare. The surroundings were bright. The walls were embedded with luminous pearls. The top of the tower was transparent. One could see the clouds in the sky. Chu Li gasped in admiration. The transparent top of the tower was made of crystal. It was extremely luxurious to use such a huge crystal to make a tower top. Goddess Attraction Mountain's pride could be seen. The inside of the tower was extremely spacious. There was only a cattail hassock in the center. There was nothing else in the surroundings. The murals in the surroundings were engraved with figures waving long swords. It was actually a sword technique. Dong Jianxin said, there are a total of 5 sword techniques engraved on the 5th floor. Murderous 3 forms is on the 2nd floor. So, Murderous 3 forms is not the top sword technique? Chuli asked. He followed Dong Jianxin to the 2nd floor. He had already imprinted all the murals on the 1st floor into his mind. Dong Jianxin shook his head. These 5 sword techniques are rare in the world. They are the top existence in swordsmanship. However, because the requirements for Murderous 3 forms are too high, it can only be reduced to the 2nd level. According to its power, it can be said to be the 4th level. Then what sword technique is on the 5th level? Chuli asked curiously. Dong Jianxin shook his head. I don't know either. Chuli looked at him doubtfully. Dong Jianxin said, the 5th floor requires enough cultivation to step into the 5th floor. Moreover, it is useless to go to the 5th floor. You need enough qualifications to see the sword technique. If you don't have the qualifications, you won't be able to see anything even if you have enough cultivation. Chuli's interest was piqued. Dong Jianxin said, you should first master Murderous 3 forms. Although you are a genius, you may not be able to master Murderous 3 forms. Chuli smiled and shook his head. I want to try. If it was other martial arts, he would not dare to boast like this. However, he was very confident in swordsmanship. His own attainments in swordsmanship were extremely deep. His understanding of swordsmanship was incomparably thorough. He had been fusing various sword techniques and was beginning to see results. Come. Dong Jianxin stepped onto the 2nd floor. Chuli saw the murals on the surrounding walls. He frowned and said, there are only 3 forms? There were a total of 81 murals. It was really incomparably complicated. This is Murderous 3 forms. Dong Jianxin smiled. You can comprehend it yourself. I don't practice this. I will send a meal in every day. Chapter 1548. Chuli's eyes were completely attracted by the murals, and he could not care about Dong Jianxin. The murals were clearly reflected in his mind and were directly imprinted in it. He rearranged them into a circle in the void of his mind, which was no different from the positions in the sword gauntlet. Later, he found that there were some problems with these positions, and the arrangement was not smooth enough, so he rearranged them. He began to arrange them clockwise from left to right, and the first one on the left continued until the last one, forming a circle. He seemed to be standing in this circle, and his eyes looked from left to right, and the 81 murals flashed in sequence. His perspective changed again, and he stood still, letting these murals revolve around him, as if he was playing a movie in his past life, and each painting was like a frame-by-frame movement. Gradually, the murals revolved at high speed, and a figure seemed to be condensed in the center of the murals. As the murals flashed, the figure waved a long sword and made one movement after another, forming a sword technique. This was an extremely smooth sword technique, and every movement was subtle and mysterious, as if there were 81 movements, but as the murals spun faster, these 81 movements seemed to be condensed and simplified. The figure in the center moved from fast to slow, as if slowly raising the sword, slowly stabbing it, then retracting the sword and stabbing it again. The movement became clumsy and slow, as if the sword was heavy and powerless to control. Chuli looked at the figure thoughtfully. The murals spun faster, and the figure's movements became slower. Every movement of the long sword seemed to be extremely difficult, as if the sword was holding a mountain, and he himself was also holding a mountain. The long sword was drawn, the long sword stabbed, and the long sword was retracted. Only these 3 movements were actually the simplest and most common sword technique. Chuli sat cross-legged on the bright yellow cattail hassock, motionless, and fell into deep thought. He was thinking about why such an exquisite sword technique would eventually turn into such a simple sword. The so-called heaven-murdering 3 forms should be 3 sword techniques, but he only saw one move. Was it because he did not comprehend enough? But the exquisiteness of this sword technique was really amazing, and it broke through his original concept of swordsmanship and broke through the limit of his imagination. A sword technique could be so exquisite that it was almost magical. But if he wanted to perform such a move, how fast would his sword need to be? It looked simple, but it was actually extremely difficult. He was able to manifest this sword thanks to his tyrannical soul and unique talent. The void of the mind was not something that anyone could condense, and he was blessed with such an ability. More importantly, there was the heavenly star void technique. Without this technique, even if he had the mind void, it would have been very difficult for him to deduce it so easily. The wonders of the heavenly star void technique still needed to be further explored. If others wanted to understand the mystery of this sword, they did not know how long it would take. But he understood it quickly, and it would be very difficult to practice it. But it was very difficult. It was easy to understand, but it was very difficult to practice it. He thought for a long time, and finally got up and decided to slowly practice one move at a time. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. No matter how difficult it is, he still has to continue. If he really mastered this murdering heaven 3 styles, even without the murdering heaven sword, his own ability would increase a lot. Such a wondrous sword technique had truly surpassed one's imagination. The wisdom of the predecessors was truly admirable. He thought of the other 4 sword techniques, but he was not in a hurry to look at them. He wanted to practice this sword technique first. He pulled out the Crouching Tiger Divine Sword and practiced one move at a time. His talent in sword techniques was very high, and he could remember it once. After 10 times, he was already familiar with it. First, he practiced each sword technique to perfection, and then tried to practice them together. After practicing once, he practiced a second time and a third time. He constantly felt the essence of it during practice and wanted to absorb it into the sword technique that he had created. But he realized that all his exquisite sword techniques were encompassed by these 81 moves. It was really the most exquisite sword techniques in the world, and he was unable to extricate himself from it. The more he practiced, the more he felt the taste was endless, like drinking wine. After an unknown period of time, footsteps came from outside. Dong Jianxin came in with a lunchbox. When he put down the lunchbox, there was already another lunchbox on the ground. It was obvious that it had been placed there earlier, and he had forgotten to eat. He seemed to vaguely remember Dong Jianxin reminding him to eat. He agreed and then continued to practice. He did not know how many times he had done this, but now he realized that his stomach was empty. He was attracted by this exquisite sword technique, and he really forgot to eat and sleep. This process had happened several times. Every time he remembered that he seemed to have not eaten, but he soon forgot to eat. The next time Dong Jianxin came, he remembered again, but after a little delay, he forgot again. Dong Jianxin waved and said, "Brother, come eat." Chuli agreed and continued to practice, just like before. "Brother," Dong Jianxin shouted. The sound reverberated in the spacious building, waking him up completely. Chuli felt that his whole body was full of energy and there was no discomfort. His stomach was empty, but he was full of energy. He felt very good. He smiled and said, "Brother, how many times have you come?" 10 days. Dong Jianxin scoffed. "You really are something. 10 days without eating or drinking." Chuli was surprised. 10 days? Dong Jianxin looked at him and said, "Brother, it seems that your cultivation level is really deep. I can't last 10 days. It's okay not to eat for 10 days, but I can't stand not drinking water." Dong Jianxin shook his head and said, "How did you do it?" Chuli was startled and shook his head. His body was constantly changing. He had eaten spirit pills, cultivated several kinds of advanced martial arts, and strengthened his body with the dragon taming technique and the evil nether dragon. Now, his body was indeed beyond the level of mortals. "You," Dong Jianxin sighed. "This murderous 3 forms is not so easy to master. Don't think that you can do it in one go. If you want to understand it, it will take some effort. It must be a headache, right?" Chuli smiled and said, "It's okay. I'm almost done." "Oh." Dong Jianxin looked at him doubtfully. Chuli said, "Actually, this sword technique is not that difficult. It might be difficult for others. Only after practicing the sword technique to a profound level could they derive the heavy, slow, and clumsy sword, but he had already deduced it through the void of his mind. The most important and most difficult deduction had been completed. It was like looking for a trail in the fog. The trail was difficult to walk, and the process of finding it was also difficult. He had found the trail, and he just needed to walk slowly. Dong Jianxin snorted and said, "Junior brother, you are a genius, but don't underestimate these sword techniques. These 5 sword techniques are the best in the world. If you can comprehend one of them, you can rely on it to dominate the world." Chu Li smiled and said, "Brother, you don't believe me? What do you think?" Dong Jianxin shook his head and said disapprovingly, "Don't be too ambitious. Cultivate honestly. Also, eat regularly. How can your body stand not eating? Even if your body is strong, you can't be so careless." Yes, yes. Chu Li saw that he continued. So tired? Antibacterial fiber? Skeleton fence? Pie paper? 7-1 Wei Jun me? It's just so. Dong Jianxin said lightly. The next set of breeze sword has been mastered. Chu Li smiled and said, "How about we have a spar?" Sure. This was exactly what Dong Jianxin wanted. He had long wanted to teach this arrogant brother a lesson. The breeze sword took him several years to cultivate, and its power was amazing. He wanted Chu Li to have a good taste of the sword technique in the sword gauntlet. Chu Li lightly shook the crouching tiger divine sword. Dong Jianxin scoffed and said, "Watch my sword." Chapter 1549. Ding, 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 ding. Chu Li swung his sword slowly and painstakingly. His movements were almost exactly the same. It was the murderous 3 forms. He always felt that it should not be called the murderous 3 forms, but the first form. Perhaps he had not been able to comprehend the other 2 forms, and only comprehended one form. Was it because his comprehension was not good enough, or was it because his cultivation was too shallow? He did not know that almost no one could evolve the 81 swords into one form. At most, it could be evolved into 3 forms. His cultivation was deep, coupled with the heavenly star insight and his profound swordsmanship attainments. It was so easy to transform it into one form. Ding, 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 ding. The clear sound was incessant. Dong Jianxin's movements became lighter and lighter. His shadow could hardly be seen. Only the sword's light was faintly discernible. The sword could not be seen clearly. One could only feel a breeze, soft and agile. In the blink of an eye, more than 100 swords were swung out. Dong Jianxin retreated and finally revealed the sword. He returned the sword to its sheath and looked at Chu Li in admiration. "Brother, what swordsmanship is this?" Chu Li smiled. "Murderous 3 forms." "This is murderous 3 forms?" Dong Jianxin nodded slowly. "As expected of murderous 3 forms. Its power is amazing. But why did you only cultivate one form?" Chu Li smiled bitterly. "I don't know. I can only comprehend one form. This form is powerful enough." Dong Jianxin exclaimed. "Only with such swordsmanship can you control murderous sword. Otherwise, it will not listen to you at all. It will even counterattack." Chu Li smiled. "Is this murderous sword really so strange?" "Very strange." Dong Jianxin nodded slowly. "It is said that this sword is almost possessed. I have cultivated to this level. Can I use murderous sword?" "You will have to ask Master." "Is Master here?" "He has already returned and taught Tang Su a lesson." Dong Jianxin beamed with joy. It was a contrast to his usual seriousness. Chu Li suddenly laughed and felt relieved. Unfortunately, it was not him who did it. Otherwise, it would be even more satisfying. "Let's go. You eat first and go see Master." Dong Jianxin pointed to the lunchbox by his feet. Their swords flashed, but they did not touch the lunchbox. It was clear that Dong Jianxin's control of swordsmanship was excellent. Chu Li had the intention to cultivate it. "Let's meet Master first," Chu Li said. Dong Jianxin didn't insist anymore. The 2 of them left the sword tower and arrived at a large hall. Zhou Dunley was sitting on a bright yellow cattail hassock, quietly reading a scroll. When he heard the footsteps, he put down the scroll, smiled, and looked at the 2 people, secretly satisfied. Of these two disciples, one was a genius with deep wisdom, while the other was honest and strict. There was no scheming or scheming between them, so Goddess Attraction Mountain did not have to worry about not growing stronger. Dong Jinshin reported the swordsmanship that Chu Li had mastered and asked about it. "Well, let's see how it goes," Zhou dumbly said. Chu Li immediately unsheathed his sword and slowly thrust it forward before slowly sheathing it. His movements were indescribably difficult. It was as if he was a child who could not hold a sword properly and was swinging it. It made the onlookers feel anxious and want to take his place. Zhou Dunley's eyes flashed, and the room suddenly lit up as if there was a flash of lightning. Chu Li turned to look at him. "Good sword technique." Zhou Dunley nodded lightly. "You have already mastered Murdering Heaven 3 styles." "You succeeded?" Dong Jian was surprised. Chu Li also looked at him in surprise. "Master, aren't there 3 styles?" "You have already mastered 3 styles." Zhou Dunley nodded. "There is obviously only one style," Chu Li said. Zhou Dunley chuckled lightly. "Who said there's only one style? Sword draw, sword strike, sword return. Aren't these 3 styles?" "This." Chu Li was dumbfounded. He had never thought of this answer. Zhou Dunley laughed. "To be honest, I have not mastered this Murdering Heaven 3 styles. I have only heard of these 3 styles. You can master it. You are indeed talented and can use Murdering Heaven sword." Chu Li looked at him in a daze. Zhou Dunley's words made him suddenly have a flash of inspiration. 3 styles, sword draw, sword strike, sword return, these are the 3 styles. Then why was he only obsessed with sword strike and neglected sword draw and sword return? In fact, sword draw and sword return were also exquisite and had amazing power. Zhou Dunley saw him like this, shook his head and smiled, then glanced at Dong Jinshin. Dong Jinshin showed a look of admiration. "Cough, how is it?" Zhou Dunley interrupted Chu Li's racing thoughts. Chu Li returned to his senses and smiled. "Thank you, master." "No need to thank me." Zhou Dunley smiled and shook his head. "Chu Li, I have to tell you clearly about the dangers of this Heaven Regicide sword. You can only use it once, or else you'll suffer a backlash. Although you're powerful, you might not be able to survive. What's more frightening is that it will stimulate your murderous nature." Chu Li said in a low voice, "Master, don't worry, I will be careful. Once I feel the backlash, I will immediately throw it away. It will be too late." Zhou Dunley shook his head. "Once the backlash starts, you will not throw it away even if I ask you to. It is like it is your woman, your parents. How can you throw it away?" Chu Li laughed. "Is it that powerful? Don't try it lightly," Zhou Dunley said. "Murdering Heaven sword has always been suppressed by Goddess Attraction Mountain because it is too dangerous. I am afraid you will lose yourself in it. Even if you kill Tang Su, it is not worth it." Chu Li said. "Tang Su's martial arts is really powerful, right?" Zhou Dunley nodded slowly. "Indeed better than Tang Haoyan. His mind is also more cunning and quick-witted, not easy to deal with. Master, since he is such a threat, then just cripple him," Dong Jian said in his heart. Zhou Dunley shook his head. "I've already heavily injured him. He will not be able to fight again within a month." Chu Li's eyes flashed. He was deep in thought. Zhou Dunley said, "Don't even think about finding him. He must be looking for a secret place to heal, maybe even in the Imperial Mausoleum." The Imperial Mausoleum. Chu Li was deep in thought. He knew what kind of place the Imperial Mausoleum was. Even the Ji Dynasty's Imperial Mausoleum hid enlightened masters, let alone the Fu Dynasty's Imperial Mausoleum. The Imperial Mausoleum was a strange place. It was a world of its own. In the Imperial Mausoleum, one could become an enlightened master by comprehending the enlightened master's remains, but these enlightened masters could only exist in the Imperial Mausoleum. Once they stepped out of the Imperial Mausoleum, they would immediately be stripped of their enlightened master's powers. They could only become grandmasters. Although Tang Su was currently weak, if he hid in the Imperial Mausoleum, there was nothing Chu Li could do. He would only be courting death if he went in. Zhou Dunley laughed. "You can forget about taking advantage of the situation. It is better for you to cultivate honestly." "Yes." Chu Li nodded. Joe Dunley said, "You have already cultivated to the 7th level. It will not be that easy to go further. Calm down and take it slow." "Yes." Chuli nodded helplessly. Joe Dunley stood up and left the basilica. When he arrived outside the basilica, he gently flew up and landed on the roof of the basilica, then took out a long sword from the mouth of the water-swallowing beast on the eaves of the basilica. It was ancient and colorful. He landed lightly in front of Chuli and handed the long sword to him. "Take it." Chuli received it with both hands. "This is the Sky Regal Sword." Joe Dunley nodded. "It needs wind and frost to polish its inauspicious energy. Even so, the effect is not great. It is still a fierce blade. You must be careful." "Yes." Chuli could not hide his high spirits. He pressed his hand on the hilt of the sword. "Jung!" A clear sound came from the scabbard. Chapter 1550. Chuli felt like an earthquake. His mind shook violently, and his body shook along with it. "Brother?" Dong Jianxin was startled and quickly reached out to help him. Joe Dunley pulled him back and shook his head. Dong Jianxin said, "Master, this sword is not something that anyone can wield." Joe Dunley shook his head and said, "Even if it is not unsheathed, it has the power of devouring. If you can't even resist a little bit, it's better not to take this sword." "Is this sword so powerful?" Dong Jianxin said. "Why is it so restless in the scabbard?" "So this sword is ominous." Joe Dunley nodded slowly and said, "Even if it is not unsheathed, it will still affect its master." Dong Jianxin said, "Master, can brother do it? Don't delay his bright future. If he is really hurt, it will not be worth it. It's useless to persuade him." Joe Dunley shook his head. He saw through Chu Li's temperament. Whether it was said that he was determined or stubborn, it was difficult for others to persuade him. He could only let nature take its course and let him suffer a little. "Sigh, why bother?" Dong Jianxin shook his head. Joe Dunley smiled. It was clear that the two of them had different temperaments. Jian Xin did not like to fight. She looked serious, but her temperament was soft. On the other hand, Chu Li was the complete opposite. He was fearless and had a smile on his face, but his temperament was extremely firm. They were both humiliated. Jianxin was not in a hurry to take revenge. He avoided it if he could. He didn't want to take revenge so much. But Chu Li was different. He wanted to face the difficulties and kill his opponent no matter how much he suffered. The scene in front of Chu Li suddenly changed. It was as if he was in a hell of corpses and a sea of blood. As far as the eye could see, the surroundings were densely packed with people, all of them clad in armor, standing on the battlefield. Everyone was fighting with their lives on the line, fighting to the death. Broken limbs flew everywhere, and blood flowed like a river. He was also wearing a suit of armor, and was currently surrounded by 3 enemies. A spear was stabbed into his stomach, and his intestines were spilling out. The pain was unbearable, and when he saw the spearman who stabbed him smiling cruelly at him, he felt pain and anger, as if he was burning. He only wanted to disregard everything and kill that spearman. However, the spear-wielding man turned around and tried to escape, but he was quickly blocked by the crowd. He tried his best to kill the people in front of him, and he didn't stop. His vision was covered by blood, and the thick smell of blood assaulted his nostrils. "Moo!" A shout suddenly rang out. His mind immediately became clear, and everything in front of him instantly shattered. He felt like a long time had passed, but it was only a moment. Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture circulated in his mind, and the golden lotus flickered, expelling these anomalies. Chuli let out a long sigh of relief. He slowly opened his eyes and lowered his head to look at the long sword. Only then did he see it clearly. The hilt of the sword was wrapped in a moon-white silk ribbon, and it was still very new, without any signs of age. The blade was carved with exquisite patterns, and it was overflowing with an ancient aura. Although the silk ribbon on the hilt was shiny, it could not hide the sword's ancient aura. The scabbard was faintly green, as if it was made of black jade. The blade was as light as a feather, and it was indescribably strange, as if it would float away if one was not careful. Joe Dunley smiled. Can you suppress it? Chu Li looked up and gave a fist salute. Thank you, Master. It's fine. It seems like you're indeed suitable to be its owner. Zhou dumbly nodded slowly. When I received this sword back then, I was almost affected, and I couldn't wake up. Chu Li smiled. I've cultivated Mahavairocana's immobility scripture. I see. Zhou dumbly came to a realization, and then his expression became serious. But don't be careless because of this. This sword's ferocity is beyond imagination, and it's accumulated for thousands of years. It's not something that can be resisted by one person. Master, will it be effective if I put it in a Buddhist temple to dispel the ferocity? Chu Li asked. Zhou dumbly pondered, then shook his head. I've never tried it before, but you can try. There are no Buddhist sects in the Fu dynasty, and all Buddhist sects have been expelled from the Fu dynasty. As the mountain master of Goddess Attraction Mountain, he naturally would not seek help from the Buddhist sects outside the Fu dynasty. Chu Li said, I'd like to try. All right, Zhou dumbly said. If it can dispel the ferocity, even if it can't be completely dispelled, it'll be a good thing to be able to use it again. All right, if you feel that you can't suppress it anymore, don't force it. Send it back immediately. Yes. Chu Li nodded. He dared not underestimate this sword. After experiencing it for himself, it was indeed shocking. He thought of the Tempest Temple. There were enlightened masters in the Tempest Temple as well, and the Buddhist sects were best at dispelling ferocity and purifying people into Buddhahood. Although his Great Light Scripture and Mahavairocana's Immobility Scripture could also purify people, they were not specialized purification techniques. It would be best to find a scholarly cultivator or an eminent monk who specialized in Buddhism to do this. Currently, he did not have any conflict with the Tempest Temple. Originally, when he and Fa Yuan were about to become enlightened masters, the Tempest Temple would definitely weaken him at a critical moment to ensure that Fa Yuan could become the youth champion, the Ji dynasty's imperial emperor, and then become an enlightened master. Now that he had entered Goddess Attraction Mountain and become a member of the Fu dynasty, the Tempest Temple could finally heave a sigh of relief. They no longer had any conflict of interest with Chu Li, and in addition to his friendship with Fa Yuan, it should not be difficult to ask them to purify this sword. Chu Li did as he thought of it. He fist saluted and left. The Great Lane Temple stood majestically amidst the lush green peaks of the ancient trees. Under the sunlight, the Tempest Temple looked solemn and sacred. The glazed golden roof reflected the sun's rays, making it difficult for people to look directly at it. The sound of chanting lingered in the air, and the calming sandalwood fragrance was faintly discernible. Chu Li arrived at the steps outside the Tempest Temple. There were several ancient trees around him that seemed to reach into the sky, and there seemed to be no end to them. Standing under the trees, he felt so small and insignificant that he could not help but want to kneel on the ground. The temple door was wide open, and two gray-robed novice monks were playing at the bottom of the steps. When they saw him, they looked over curiously. Chu Li stepped forward and smiled. Two young masters, I am Chu Li, and I would like to meet Fa Yuan. Masters Junior Fa Yuan? The two novice monks looked at him curiously, then turned around and went through the temple door. A moment later, Fa Yuan, dressed in a gray robe, fluttered over. There was no one beside him. He was still handsome, and his aura was much more mature. His cultivation level was also far higher than before. Although he was not as good as Chu Li, he was not inferior to Lu Yurong, who had improved by leaps and bounds in Goddess Attraction Mountain. It was obvious that Fa Yuan was not idle either. He was also cultivating with all his might. Brother Chu. Fa Yuan bowed with pressed palms and smiled. Chu Li smiled. Monk, I came here personally because I have a request. Fa Yuan smiled. I knew that Brother Chu would not come without a reason. Please speak. He was friendly and magnanimous towards Chu Li, no longer feeling guilty like before. Chu Li entering Goddess Attraction Mountain made him completely relaxed. Chu Li patted the Sky Killer Sword and explained the sword's characteristics. Then, he told him his request. He wanted to ask the High Monk to dispel the sword's evil aura so that he could control it and avoid the sword's backlash. Fa Yuan looked at the sky killer sword and frowned slightly. He shook his head and sighed. What a powerful sword. Brother Chu, I have to ask Masters Junior and Masters Junior before I can decide. The sword's evil aura is too shocking. Sure. Chu Li handed the sky killer sword over. Chapter 1551. Fa Yuan did not bring him into the basilica. Instead, he went straight to his own temple. It was quiet and elegant. Fa Yuan's temple was planted with green bamboos. The bamboo forest was rustling, and the simple wooden house had a faint fragrance of flowers, giving off a faint sense of zen. The two came to the main hall and sat on two cattail hassocks. A novice monk came to serve them tea. Chu Li sipped his tea and smiled. It's so quiet here. Fa Yuan smiled. I grew up here. Looks like you've been nurtured since you were young. Chu Li smiled. Otherwise, how would those novice monks have temples? That's true. Fa Yuan smiled and nodded. He had innate wisdom and had displayed a child prodigy since he was young. Ordinary people could not compare to him, so he was nurtured as a Buddha. He had the best masters to teach him Dharma and martial arts to achieve his current achievements. After a while, he stood up and chanted Buddha's name to welcome an old monk with white eyebrows and beard. The old monk was short and skinny like a child. He was the same height as the novice monk who served them tea. His silvery white beard touched his chest and fluttered in the wind. His white eyebrows drooped to his cheeks. His face was like a baby's without a wrinkle, and there was no trace of inner energy around him. As he walked, the black beads around his neck swayed. The beads and his white beard contrasted, making the black even darker and the white even brighter. Honorable Master Kongzhu. Fa Yuan pressed his palms together and bowed. Sorry to disturb you. The old monk Kongzhu bowed and smiled. Fa Yuan, where's the sky-killing sword? Chu Li pressed his palms together. Greetings, Master Kongzhu. Kongzhu smiled. No need for formalities. I've heard of almsgiver Chu. Is this the sky-killing sword? Chu Li took off the sky-killing sword and presented it with both hands. Master, please take a look. Kongzhu's expression was solemn. He slowly extended his hands and took the sky-killing sword. His body swayed slightly, and he suddenly closed his eyes. Chu Li frowned and was about to chant Mahavairocana's immobility scripture. The beads on Kongzhu's chest suddenly lit up. Amitabha. Kongzhu chanted Buddha's name and opened his eyes. His eyes were bright, but not dazzling. Even now, there was no fluctuation of inner energy. He really did not cultivate martial arts. Master, are you okay? Chu Li asked. This sword is too fierce. It's fine. Kongzhu shook his head and stared at the heaven-killing sword, sighing, as expected of the heaven-killing sword, worthy of its fierce name. Chu Li asked, Great Master, have you heard of the sky regaining sword's reputation? Kongzhu nodded slowly. The heaven-slaughtering sword has disappeared for nearly 1,000 years. But a few thousand years ago, it was famous and almost everyone knew about it. Chu Li looked at him. Fa Yuan also had a curious look on his face. Kongzhu came to the hall and sat cross-legged. Chu Li and Fa Yuan sat opposite him. 1,000 years ago, there was a sect called the Changshan sect. Kongzhu frowned slightly and sighed. The doctrine of this sect is to sacrifice oneself to become a saint by sacrificing oneself to ascend to the position of a saint. From then on, one will never perish. Sacrifice? Chu Li hesitated. I think there's a sacrifice formula in circulation now. The sacrifice incantation came from the Changshan denomination, but it's just an incomplete cultivation method that was passed on to outsiders. It's just a small part of it, not even worth mentioning. Kongzhu shook his head and said, Compared to the real sacrifice magic, it's not worth mentioning. Chu Li said, I've heard that the sacrifice formula is incredibly powerful and can multiply one's power. Fa Yuan smiled. Brother Chu, you've cultivated the sacrifice formula, right? Chu Li nodded calmly. Kongzhu shook his head. Once the sacrifice magic is cultivated, one's power can multiply by 10 times. Chu Li was stunned. then shook his head. How can one's body withstand it? Why is it called the divine technique? Kongzhu said, it's because it can do what others can't. It's incredible. Chu Li frowned. If you really want to cast it, it'll be hard to survive after casting it, right? You can survive. Kongzhu shook his head. And there won't be too many consequences. Chu Li was puzzled and felt that it was impossible. However, Monk Kongzhu would not lie. At his level and cultivation level, lying would be breaking the precepts. It would not be beneficial, but it would cause great harm. Fa Yuan said, Honorable Master, isn't this going against the principles of heaven and earth? How can an ordinary person understand the principles of heaven and earth? Kongzhu shook his head and sighed. Do you think that everything has its rules and cannot be violated? The world is so big that nothing is too strange. You should broaden your horizons. Amitabha. Fa Yuan bowed with pressed palms, expressing his understanding. Then aren't they invincible in the world? Chu Li frowned. He still did not believe it. If their power suddenly increased by 10 times, they would really become monsters. Fa Yuan nodded slowly. They are powerful, but they rarely come out. They usually stay in their own faction and focus on cultivating, hoping to live forever. There are no immortals in the world. Chu Li shook his head. Kongzhu said, although the disciples of the longevity faction cannot die, there are many who have lived for more than 1,000 years. Chu Li raised his eyebrows. Kongzhu said, their technique attracted the covetous eyes of various sects, so they besieged the longevity faction. More than 10 enlightened masters participated. Fa Yuan sighed. With that, the longevity faction was disbanded. Fa Yuan, you're wrong. Kongzhu shook his head. In that battle, the leader of the longevity faction used this sky killer sword to kill 30 enlightened masters, causing them to flee. It's that powerful? Fa Yuan was shocked. Kongzhu looked down at the sword and sighed. It said that this sword was made by more than 10 longevity faction members who committed suicide as a blood sacrifice. They sacrificed themselves to make the sword, so the sword contains spiritual energy and can devour spiritual force. This is why this sword is so fierce. More than 10 enlightened masters' spiritual force gathered in the sword. Who could block it? Fa Yuan asked. Then, is the longevity faction still around? It's long gone. Kongzhu pressed his palms together and chanted the name of Buddha. All techniques are void. Even a longevity faction could not avoid the nirvana fruit, let alone others. How could such a powerful longevity faction be gone? Fa Yuan was in disbelief. After that battle, the longevity faction went into seclusion. No one knows about it. Kongzhu sighed. There's no trace of them anymore. No sacrificial divine technique has appeared for thousands of years. It's obvious that they're dead, or else enlightened masters would have appeared. What a pity! Fa Yuan sighed. Chu Li was deep in thought. No wonder the murderous 3 forms were so exquisite. They came from the longevity faction. Thinking back to the scene of killing 30 enlightened masters with one sword, it was really fascinating. He wished he could be born in that era and witness the victory with his own eyes. Then, could this sword be related to the longevity faction's inheritance? Fa Yuan frowned and looked at Chu Li. Chu Li smiled. It's possible. Kongzhu said, this sword has appeared a few times. Each time, it caused endless killings. It disappeared 1,000 years ago. So, it's at Goddess Attraction Mountain. Goddess Attraction Mountain is considered to be a meritorious place. It's really not suitable for this sword to appear. It's fine if I take it out now, right? Chu Li smiled. Kongzhu said, the reason why this sword started killing was because of the backlash. It caused the sword owner to become possessed, and kill became his second nature. In addition, this sword's sharpness is unparalleled and unstoppable. As long as you don't suffer from the backlash, you should be fine. Fa Yuan let out a sigh of relief. Even those whose martial arts are far superior to the sword owner can't do anything about it. Chapter 1552. Fa Yuan was silent. This sword was comparable to an enlightened master. How powerful was that? It was a huge temptation to anyone. He looked at Chu Li, Then at Kongzhu, "Honorable Master, how long will it take to purify this sword?" "With the help of the entire temple, it should be weakened in 3 days," Kongzhu replied. "It'll be hard to see results in less than 3 days, but to completely eliminate its malevolent aura, the Tempest Temple might not be able to do it. It'll take hundreds of years of hard work." Umapa. Fa Yuan shook his head and sighed. Chuli smiled. "Then I'll wait for you for 3 days." "Thank you, High Monks." "Sure," Kongzhu slowly asked, "but almsgiver Chu, can you leave this sword without worry?" "It's fine," Chuli smiled. "I trust the temple." "All right, I can guarantee that I won't lose this sword." "Please stay for 3 days, almsgiver Chu," Kongzhu said. "Thank you, master." Chuli bowed. Kongzhu held the sword with both hands and slowly left the temple. Fa Yuan watched as Kongzhu's thin and short figure disappeared. He turned to look at Chuli. "Brother Chu, are you sure?" Chuli smiled. "I believe the temple won't make a mistake." Sighed. Fa Yuan nodded. He suddenly remembered that Chuli had Goddess Attraction Mountain behind him. He was not afraid that the Tempest Temple would steal the sword. Moreover, the sword was inauspicious and should not be kept. It was said to be an ominous sword. Chuli said, "Fa Yuan, your cultivation level has improved. Congratulations." Fa Yuan laughed and shook his head. "Brother Chu, you're showing off, aren't you?" In terms of cultivation level, Chuli was far better than him. He could even kill an enlightened master and become a #1 master of the Grandmaster. The people of the Ji Dynasty's martial arts world might not know who the emperor was, but they all knew who Chuli was. Come. It's rare for Brother Chu to be here. Let's spar." Fa Yuan smiled. "That's what I was thinking," Chuli replied. The two came to the center of the temple and began to fight in the open space. They did not use their martial arts, only their techniques. Chuli stayed in the Fa Yuan Zen temple for 3 days. Every day, they would discuss scriptures and theories, and they would spar with each other in martial arts. Both of them had made great progress. Although Chu Li's cultivation level was far higher than Fa Yuan's, his foundation was not as deep and exquisite as Fa Yuan's. What he had learned was too diverse, and he had not been able to integrate them into one. He had not even been able to create a complete sword art. Moreover, the mental cultivation methods that he had learned were the best in the world. An ordinary person could become a top-notch master with just one of them, but it would be difficult for him to perfect it in his entire life. However, he had practiced them all at once, and his energy was far from enough. On the morning of the 4th day, he was sparring with Fa Yuan. The Divine Fist of Divine Light was compared to Fa Yuan's various fist techniques. His understanding of the Divine Fist of Divine Light had deepened. Fa Yuan was also a genius in martial arts. The martial arts of the Tempest Temple were extensive and profound. The sound of footsteps could be heard as Kongzhu slowly entered the monastery with the heaven-killing sword in hand. Chuli stepped forward and pressed his palms together in obeisance. After thanking him, he received the sky, regaining sword, but he felt that the sword had become slightly heavier. Slightly taken aback, he looked at Kongzhu. He could feel that this was the sky, regaining sword, but how could it be heavier? Could it be that they had smeared something on the sword? Kongzhu said, "Almsgiver Chu, this sword has been purified by us for 3 days. Its resentment has dissipated a little, and it has also become slightly heavier. However, its killing intent is still oppressive, and it will definitely devour its owner. So, Almsgiver Chu, if you can, please don't use it. If you really have to use it, you can't use it more than 2 times. 2 times? Chu Li slowly nodded. I know that Almsgiver Chu possesses the Mahavairocana's immobility scripture. Kongzhu looked at Chu Li sternly. If not, Almsgiver Chu can only use this sword once. If you use it more than once, you will become the sword's slave and the master of slaughter. You will definitely become the world's public enemy, and you will die a terrible death. You must remember not to use it more than 2 times, 2 times. Thank you, Master. Chuli nodded solemnly. Originally, he was still hoping for a fluke, thinking that his soul was strong, and with the protection of Mahavairocana's immobility scripture, he should be able to resist the backlash. Now, it seemed that this Master Kongzhu did not know martial arts, but had a penetrating eye. Seeing that he had Mahavirakanna's immobility scripture, he still warned him like this. It seemed that even Mahavirakanna's immobility scripture could not block the heaven-killing sword. He didn't dare take this risk. If he really was controlled by the heaven-killing sword backlash, then that would truly become a joke. This sword could only be used to kill Tang Su. It couldn't be used normally. Kongzhu said, "As for whether the sky-killing sword is related to the inheritance of the Changshan denomination, almsgiver Chu, you'd better not think about it. Otherwise, you'll be wasting your time. If it was really related, the inheritance of the Changshan denomination would have appeared long ago." Chu nodded. Kongzhu pressed his palms together and turned to leave. As he watched him leave, Chu hung the heaven-killing sword on his waist. He raised his head and stared at the heaven-killing sword. He smiled and said, "Want to try?" "No need." Fa Yuan shook his head. Chu raised his eyebrows. "Can you really endure it?" "I'm about Buddha." Fa Yuan chanted the name of Buddha and closed his eyes. Chu stopped teasing him and smiled. "If that's the case, I should take my leave. Take care of yourself, lest others take advantage of you." "Brother Chu too," Fa Yuan said. "The Fu dynasty is tyrannical. Brother Chu, don't go head-on with them." Chu smiled and nodded, then suddenly disappeared. Fa Yuan was stunned, and his expression changed slightly. This was the Tempest Temple, and it was shrouded in a huge formation. It was also shrouded in the Heaven and God Pills. It looked peaceful, but it was extremely strict. Divine powers could not be used in the formation, but Chu could disappear in an instant. This was definitely not martial arts. Fa Yuan's expression was solemn. This was not a small matter. He needed to verify it. Could it be that the formation had failed? Chu appeared in the Divine Light Basilica in the next moment. The morning sun shone brightly on the Divine Light Basilica, and it was filled with auspicious energy. Sun Mingwe was dressed in a snow-white robe, and a white veil covered her face. She was still reading the dossiers behind the table. When she looked up and saw Chu, she smiled and put down the dossiers. She approached him, and a faint fragrance wafted into Chu's nose. Her eyes were like limpid autumn waters as she glanced at Chu. Chu smiled. "Has the Qiu dynasty and the Li dynasty started fighting?" "They have." Sun Mingwen nodded slowly, and her eyes flashed coldly. "It seems like there will be a big battle." Chu said, "How about we break into the reincarnation temple?" "Are you confident?" Sun Mingwen asked. Chu scoffed. "How can I not vent my anger? Is Senior Song all right?" "He's still in isolated cultivation." Sun Mingwen frowned. "His injuries are too severe. He needs a long time to recover. That reincarnation pagoda is really despicable." Chu said, "Let's break into the reincarnation pagoda this time." He actually wanted to explore the wonders of the reincarnation pagoda. He realized that the reincarnation pagoda was not as simple as he thought. Monk Zhishan said that the reincarnation pagoda contained the wonders of reincarnation. He thought that it was an exaggeration, but now it seemed like it was true. If not for the reincarnation pagoda, the evil nether dragon might not have survived. Although he had the life and death scripture, others could not comprehend it. Hence, the reincarnation pagoda did indeed contain the wonders of life and death. It was worth exploring. Sun Mingwe looked hesitant. What she needed to do now was not to take risks, but to play it safe and take over the enlightened master's position. Before her master went into isolated cultivation, he had repeatedly reminded her not to take risks with Chu. Now that Chu had appeared, she was tempted. Chu smiled. "Don't worry, I've borrowed the sky regaining sword from my master. Monk Luanming won't be afraid, no matter how strong he is." Sun Mingwe smiled bitterly. Chapter 1553. Chu said, "I've been wondering if I should ask about something." Sun Mingwe gave him a sidelong glance without saying a word. Chu smiled. "I'll ask then." "Forget it." Sun Mingwe scoffed. "What good can you say?" Chu said, "Logically speaking, Senior Song shouldn't be the only one worrying about this. What about the Li Dynasty's emperor? If he and Senior Song worked together, Senior Song wouldn't have been injured so badly. Sun Mingwei shook her head. Chu Li continued. Moreover, at this point, the emperor should be more anxious than Senior Song. Why do I feel that you and Senior Song are more anxious than the Li Dynasty's emperor? It's strange. Sun Mingwei scoffed. How do you know that he didn't attack? Chu Li raised his eyebrows and smiled. Did you fight Qinjinji? Of course. Sun Mingwei said. He injured Qinjinji, but it was useless. The Qiu dynasty was determined to fight, and the Li dynasty could only fight. No matter how strong an enlightened master is, he can't fight someone who isn't an enlightened master. He can't fight on the battlefield. Chu Li said, but I've never seen the Li dynasty's emperor's martial arts. He's usually in isolated cultivation. Sun Mingwei said, let's not talk about him, and don't go to the reincarnation temple. Monk Luan Ming is too cunning. Chu Li pondered and said, what if I have a way to help the Li dynasty's army win the war? How are you going to do that? Sun Mingwei asked. Chu Li said, you must have gathered information about the Qiu dynasty's generals, right? Of course, Sun Mingwei said. Do you want to see? She immediately understood Chu Li's plan. He wanted to use his power of deduction to predict the Qiu dynasty's army's movements. If he could do that and know their military strategy in advance, victory would be within reach. Knowing oneself and one's enemy was the key to victory. If the Li dynasty's army still could not win the war after knowing the enemy's movements, they might as well surrender. Without waiting for Chu Li to speak, she turned around and went to the northwest corner of the Divine Light Basilica. There was a bookshelf that reached the ceiling there. It was filled with densely packed dossiers. She floated into the air and took out a few dossiers. Then, she appeared in front of Chu Li and handed him the dossiers. Chu Li reached out to take it and smiled. Let me divine their plans. Sun Mingwei pointed at the two scrolls and said, these two are the marshal and deputy marshal of the northern expedition. The rest are the various commanders, 2 battalions of cavalry, 6 battalions of infantry, and 1 battalion of scouts. Chu Li studied the dossiers and nodded. Looks like they've sent 100,000 soldiers. Sun Mingwei nodded. 100,000 soldiers. Chu Li opened one of the scrolls. Marshal Zhong Wancheng of the northern expedition, 66 years old. He was born into a poor family and came from the lowest class of cavalrymen. He was promoted step by step and made great contributions. He rose from the rank of sergeant, commander of 100 cavalry, commander of 1,000 cavalry, commander of 10,000 cavalry, and finally deputy marshal and marshal. He took each step one step at a time, and each step was extremely solid. There is only one characteristic of using troops: stability. There is no opportunity to take advantage of. It was as stable as a boulder that was hard to move. Logically speaking, it was difficult to make great contributions in such a way of using troops and would not be able to rise to such a high position. However, he was extremely good at training troops on the basis of stability. The Qiu dynasty's cavalry was famous because of him alone. Apart from the Fu dynasty's heavy cavalry, the Qiu dynasty's cavalry was the second most powerful military force in the world. The Li dynasty's cavalry was slightly inferior. Even if the Li dynasty had military geniuses, they would not be able to catch up with the Qiu dynasty's cavalry. Actually, we don't have to do too much. As long as we can divine his whereabouts and assassinate him, the Qiu dynasty will lose half of its war. Sun Mingwei said slowly, his prestige is too high. Because of this, once he dies or is severely injured, the soldiers will be scattered and collapse without a fight. Chu Li shook his head. It's also possible that the soldiers who mourn will win. The generals of the Qiu dynasty were suppressed by him and didn't have enough prestige. Sun Mingwei scoffed. Although he's a genius in using troops, he's even more proficient in the path of whole body. That's why the Qiu dynasty emperor can't keep his bow after all his birds have been killed. Therefore, if anything happens to him, the entire Qiu dynasty's army will collapse. Chu Li nodded in realization. This is also his path of whole body. If the Qiu dynasty emperor wants to touch him, the army will be finished. Yes, Sun Mingwe said. Therefore, assassinating him is the easiest way. Do you mean that the two of us will assassinate him? Chu Li asked with a smile. Sun Mingwe said, enlightened masters can't make a move. It's just the two of us. All right. Chu Li looked at her helplessly. He knew that this was her condition. After we kill him, we'll go to the reincarnation temple. No problem. Sun Mingwen nodded lightly with a smile in her bright eyes. Chu Li shook his head. I'm afraid that I'll be punished when I return to the mountain this time. As a disciple of Goddess Attraction Mountain, I can't meddle in these matters. If he could comprehend the mystery of the reincarnation pagoda, because of this, it would be worth it even if he was punished to go into isolated cultivation. Moreover, he needed to go into isolated cultivation for a while to avoid Tang Su's focused cultivation. Tang Su would not be able to come to the isolated cultivation place. If Tang Su were to use any tricks, Master Zhou Dunley would definitely show up. Chu Li carefully looked at Zhong Wanqing's information. There was even a detailed portrait of Zhong Wanqing. He closed his eyes and tried to deduce it in his mind, but he was at a loss. There was no image on the big round mirror. He opened his eyes and shook his head. No, I have to meet Zhong Wanqing in person. Sun Mingwe said impatiently. How can you meet Zhong Wanqing? Chu Li thought for a while. Is there anyone in the Li dynasty who has seen Zhong Wanqing? The more you see him, the better. The more time you spend with him, the better. Sun Mingwe thought for a while and said, there is. Then let's go meet him, Chu Li said. Sun Mingwe said, come with me. She reached out her left hand, which was as white as jade. Chu Li shook her hand, and the scene before him suddenly became distorted. After a short moment, the scene before their eyes suddenly lit up. They were standing in front of a magnificent and majestic mansion. Two enormous limestone lions were entrenched, and, as if they had come to life, they looked down at the two of them, and a baleful aura assaulted their faces. Chu Li looked at the two lions in surprise and exclaimed, what a master! He raised his eyes to take a look, and he could tell that there was a faint, baleful aura in this mansion, and most of it was gathered on these two stone lions. This was actually a formation that drew the baleful aura over. Firstly, it would not harm the lives of the people in the mansion, and secondly, it had the ability to suppress evil. If someone with evil intentions approached the mansion gate, they would be affected by these two stone lions, and an illusion would appear. It was truly amazing. Sun Mingwe said, this is Ho Zhengming, a prince of the Li dynasty with a different surname. Lord Ho is the founder of the Li dynasty's Iron Cavalry. He was originally a spy who sneaked into the Qiu dynasty. He started as a cavalryman and followed Zhong Wanqing. Chu Li smiled. This is a rare opportunity. Yes, Sun Mingwe said slowly. The Li dynasty was weaker than the Ji dynasty back then. The Li dynasty's current status is all thanks to Lord Ho's establishment of the Li dynasty's Iron Cavalry. Chu Li said, I'd like to meet such a person. Sun Mingwe looked at the mansion. But Lord Ho has retired and no longer cares about the affairs of the court. He usually lives in seclusion and doesn't meet outsiders. We can only barge in. Chapter 1554. Ever since Chu Li mastered the Heavenly Star Insight skill, he could pass through formations and directly step into the Imperial Residence's backyard. Through the omniscient mirror, he could see an old man pacing in the backyard with his hands behind his back. He was observing the flowers and plants around him with a calm expression and was fiddling with a jade ball in his hands. The jade ball glowed as if inner energy was flowing in and out. When the light shone on his body, it seemed to be a strange spiritual energy. Chu Li glanced at the jade ball. It was a treasure that was extremely effective in healing the body. However, the strange thing was that the old man's cultivation level was not high. He was barely a grandmaster. He turned around abruptly, his eyes glowing like lightning. He was a medium build with slightly bent legs. His face was square, and his mustache gave off a sense of sharpness. His eyes were like a golden eagle looking down at him, shining brightly and threatening. This gaze was not caused by his cultivation level, but by his outward display of killing intent. Chu Li was surprised. Logically speaking, after retiring, The killing intent should be restrained inside and would not be so overbearing and aggressive. It was obvious that this was his nature and could not be compensated by his cultivation level. He had thought about it for a long time, but it only took a moment. Ho Jingming scanned their faces with his burning eyes. He was not in a hurry to speak. His gaze finally landed on Sun Mingyue and hesitantly asked, "Saint?" Sun Mingyue nodded and took off her white veil, revealing her beautiful face. She quickly put the veil back on and gave a fist salute. "Greetings, Royal Highness Ho." "Saint, please forgive me for not going out to meet you." Ho Jingming gave a fist salute and looked at Chu Li. Chu Li gave a fist salute. "Greetings, Royal Highness Ho." "Chu Li?" Ho Jingming looked confused and carefully sized him up. "Are you the Chu Li who killed the Fu Dynasty's emperor?" Chu Li nodded and smiled. "That's me. Sorry for not recognizing you." Ho Jingming's expression turned serious, and he gave a fist salute. "Young Master Chu, you're a great person. Please come in." He turned and went to the gazebo. Soon, maids came forward to serve tea, while a few protectors appeared around them. They were agitated for a while, but soon calmed down. Chu Li and Sun Mingyue had just barged into the backyard without making a sound. The protectors did not notice at all. This was truly a humiliation to them. They had treated them as if they did not exist. Although their martial arts were much weaker, they still felt indignant. Ho Jingming waited for Chu Li and Sun Mingyue to take a sip before putting down the teacup. Ho Jingming smiled and said, "Saint, you're very busy with a myriad of affairs every day. Why would you look for an old man like me who has nothing better to do?" "Royal Highness, we would like to hear you talk about Zhong Wancheng." Sun Mingyue said, "I'm sure your Royal Highness has heard that Zhong Wancheng is personally leading an army to invade Li Dynasty." Sigh. Ho Jingming smiled bitterly. "The situation is not good. It's a pity that my words are useless now. My old arms and legs can't go into battle and kill the enemy. His Highness's health is very good." Sun Mingyue said, "He can go to the battlefield again. My heart is already old. It's not suitable for me to go into battle again." Ho Jingming shook his head. "If we go up, we'll only drag our men down. An incompetent general will exhaust the entire army. If Marshal Zhong personally leads the army, it might be the last time, so he'll definitely do his best. That's why we're in danger. The Li Dynasty's combat power is still lacking." Sun Mingyue said indifferently, "Zhong Wancheng is very spirited. It won't be a problem for him to lead the army for another 100 years." Ho Jingming was startled. "As far as I know, Marshal Zhong suffered a serious injury when he was young and was left with a lingering illness. His health has never been good. He was cured 2 years ago," Sun Mingyue said. "His body is strong now." Ho Jingming's expression changed slightly, and his thick eyebrows furrowed together. Chu Li was using the omniscient mirror to look into Zhong Wancheng's mind and saw Zhong Wancheng's appearance. He was plump and had an honest smile on his face. He looked like a rustic farmer, and no one would believe that he was the commander-in-chief of an army or the Qiu dynasty's god of war. Chu Li also saw Zhong Wancheng talking to Ho Jingming and teaching him horsemanship. He also saw Zhong Wancheng charging and breaking through enemy lines with Zhong Wancheng. He could feel Ho Jingming's gratitude and respect for Zhong Wancheng, as well as a hint of helplessness and sorrow. Ho Jingming was grateful to Zhong Wancheng. Without Zhong Wancheng, he would have died because Zhong Wancheng saved his life. However, Zhong Wancheng wanted to go against the Li Dynasty. As a person of the Li Dynasty, Ho Jingming had to protect his parents, relatives, and friends. Therefore, he could only leave Zhong Wancheng and return to the Li Dynasty. He trained the Li Dynasty's cavalry with the military training techniques he learned from Zhong Wancheng to fight against the Qiu Dynasty's cavalry. Without the Li Dynasty's cavalry, the Li Dynasty would have been ravaged by the Qiu Dynasty countless times. Wherever the cavalry went, they were like locusts, leaving nothing behind. Who knew how many Li Dynasty civilians would have died under the hooves of the Qiu Dynasty's cavalry? Ho Jingming retired from the imperial court at a young age and no longer cared about anything. First, his body was weak, and second, he was driven by conflicting thoughts. Since he had trained the Li dynasty's cavalry, he did not want to meet Zhong Wansheng on the battlefield and fight each other. Ho Jingming sighed with a complicated expression. When he heard that Zhong Wansheng had recovered, he was happy and sad. He was happy that Zhong Wansheng was healthy and could live for a long time, but sad that the Li dynasty's civilians would have to suffer again. If the Qiu dynasty lost Zhong Wansheng, the two countries would be able to coexist peacefully. Chu Li asked, "What protectors does Zhong Wansheng have?" Ho Jingming was stunned, and his expression changed. "You want to assassinate him?" Sun Mingwei said, "Since we can't kill him, we can at least severely injure him. We can also stop this war and reduce the number of casualties." This, Ho Jingming sighed and said, "It's very difficult. In a military formation, you can't even use 30% of your strength. Moreover, the top experts in the army protect him too tightly, or else he would have been assassinated long ago. Over the years, he has faced thousands of assassination attempts, but not a single one succeeded. All the more reason to try," Chu Li said. Sun Mingwei asked, "Other than the military formation, what other treasures do you have?" "As far as I know, Marshal Zhong is also wearing a heavenly frost treasured clothing that can't be damaged by treasured swords. Moreover, Marshal Zhong's martial arts is extremely high, and I can't compare to him. Even you might not be able to defeat him," Ho Jingming said. Chu Li nodded. He saw Zhong Wansheng's cultivation level in Ho Jingming's mind. It was indeed unpredictable, and it was obvious that he had cultivated some kind of secret skill. It was not easy for a master in the military to cultivate to his level. Heavenly Frost treasured clothing. Sun Mingwei nodded. She thought about the news about the Heavenly Frost treasured clothing. It was said that it came from the ancient Heavenly Frost sect and was made of an unknown material. It was impervious to fire and water, swords and spears, and even crossbows could not pierce through it. Having this treasured clothing did not make one invincible on the battlefield. If one fell from a horse and was trampled by a herd of horses, no matter how powerful the clothing was, it would not be able to protect him, and he would be turned into meat paste. Having this treasured clothing could only protect him from sneak attacks and assassinations. Chu Li said, "Since he has the Heavenly Frost treasure clothing, his protectors should not be so strict, right?" Ho Jingming shook his head. "Very few people know that he has the Heavenly Frost treasure clothing. He also wants others to know, so his protectors are very strict. He has at least 20 top-notch masters protecting him." 20 top-notch masters. Sun Mingwei looked at Chu Li. Chapter 1555. Seeing their expressions, Ho Jingming immediately knew that they wanted to assassinate Zhong Wansheng. With a complicated expression, he sighed after a while. "I hope you don't kill him." Sun Mingwei shook her head. "Your Royal Highness, you have a good idea. Unfortunately, swords have no eyes. It's hard to tell if he's dead or if we fail, we'll die in his hands. If the two nations don't fight." Ho Jingming looked to the south and sighed. He knew that it was his own wishful thinking. The two nations would fight every few years or decades. They had no choice but to fight. There would always be people who would provoke them. Sometimes, the ministers could not help but challenge them. The Li dynasty could suppress the Ji dynasty, but could not invade because of the Qiu dynasty. Otherwise, if the Li dynasty invaded the Ji dynasty would become stronger, and they would no longer be afraid of the Qiu dynasty. Because of this, the Qiu dynasty would fight from time to time to weaken the Li dynasty or restrain them. They could not focus on attacking the Ji dynasty to prevent the Li dynasty from becoming stronger. These complicated relationships made it almost impossible for the two nations to live in peace. "Your Royal Highness, we'll take our leave." Sun Mingwei fist saluted. "Forgive me for not seeing you off." Ho Jingming fist saluted. Chu Li fist saluted too. The two held hands and disappeared. Ho Jingming stared at the spot where they disappeared and pondered. If he was not mistaken, the two were holding hands. The saint had always been arrogant and almost never talked to men. Now that she was holding hands with a man, it would be a sensational piece of news if this were to be leaked. In fact, it was not surprising. Among the men in the world, only Chu Li was worthy of the saint. It was not a bad thing for the two to be together. It was beneficial for the Li dynasty. Unfortunately, Chu was born in the Ji dynasty. He shook his head and turned the jade orb. The aura emitted from the jade orb flowed into his body and nourished it. Chu Li and Sun Mingwei appeared in the divine light basilica. Sun Mingwei looked at Chu Li. "How is it?" Chu Li shook his head and closed his eyes. Zhong Wanqing's face appeared in his mind. With a thought, the omniscient mirror lit up. Then, shadows began to flicker, but they were all red. Chu Li knew this was the inauspicious energy. The soaring, inauspicious energy shrouded the omniscient mirror, preventing it from displaying images clearly. It seemed to be interfering with its operation and resisting the heavenly star insight. The golden symbols on the back of the omniscient mirror began to shine brighter and brighter. The golden light seemed to pierce through the red light and drive them away. The omniscient mirror immediately displayed a clear image. The scenes kept changing, flashing and disappearing as if one was watching a lantern on horseback. After a while, Chu Li opened his eyes and sighed. "How is it?" Sun Mingwei asked. "Did you divine anything?" "Zhong Wansheng will be assassinated, but he won't be in any danger." Chu Li shook his head slowly. What he saw in his mind was not 2 assassins, but 25 top-notch masters from the Great Light Peak. Each of them was more than 100 years old, and they were not supposed to enter the martial arts world. However, at this moment, they were making their move. However, in the end, all 25 top-notch masters were killed. They could not even get close to Zhong Wansheng and were slaughtered by Zhong Wansheng's protectors. These protectors' cultivation levels were higher than theirs, and they were like fish in water when they were in the army. On the other hand, the Great Light Peak masters were weakened when they entered the army. Under such circumstances, it was not surprising that the entire army was annihilated. Chu Li observed the protectors thoughtfully and realized that they had great chemistry with each other. Moreover, they had formed a formation that condensed their cultivation level into one. Coupled with the help of the military formation, the two stacked on top of each other created a terrifying force. Even if he and Sun Mingwei went there, they might not be able to win. They would only stand a chance if they broke their formation first. Sun Mingwei frowned. "We didn't succeed?" Chu Li said, "According to my deduction, we didn't go." "Why is that?" Sun Mingwei was surprised. Chu Li wanted to say something, but stopped and turned to look at the main gate. Song Wanqing appeared at the main gate without a sound and glanced at Chu Li. Chu Li gave a fist salute and bowed. "Greetings, senior." Song Wanqing nodded lightly with a cold expression. "Mingwei can't go along with your nonsense." Sun Mingwei said, "Master, are your injuries better?" "They're fine." "Mingwei, you're not allowed to go along with Chu Li's nonsense. He's always causing trouble." Song Wanqing nodded. Sun Mingwei revealed a helpless expression. "Master, we're discussing serious matters this time. We're going to assassinate Zhong Wansheng and end this war. You don't have to show up for this. The old fellows from the other peaks are bored and making trouble out of nothing. It's just as well to let them go." Song Wanqing said. Chu Li sighed. Sun Mingwei frowned and looked at Chu Li. Chu Li said, "Senior, according to what I know, there are 20 protectors around Zhong Wansheng forming a formation. I wonder if you know what formation it is?" "8-direction formation. It's rare for you to know about this," Song Wanqing said. Chu Li sighed. "I wonder how many people you're going to send to assassinate him?" "About 20 or so," Song Wanqing pondered. "If there's too many, it'll be hard to succeed if there's too much movement. If there's too little, it'll be hard to succeed. 20 or so, 25 is just right. If you believe me, it's better not to send them to their deaths." Chu Li shook his head. "They're definitely not a match for the 8-direction formation. They'll only be annihilated." He clearly saw what would happen to these people. Naturally, he had to stop them. Song Wanqing chuckled. "You deduced this? Your heaven-peering skill has been cultivated to a very high level." Chu Li nodded calmly. "I deduced it. Then can you predict who I'll send?" Song Wanqing looked at him with a smile. She was as beautiful as a flower. Chu Li pondered for a moment and nodded slowly. "All right, I'll try." Song Wanqing looked at him in surprise. Could it be that the deduction technique could really reach such a level? Serve me a brush and ink. Chu Li turned his head and looked at Sun Mingwe. Sun Mingwe pointed at her desk. Chu Li came to the back of the table and sat down. He picked up the brush and began to write on the paper. A moment later, it was a portrait. He picked it up and started the second one. In one go, he drew the portraits of 25 people. Finally, he put down the brush and blew on it gently. He raised his head and smiled at Song Wanqing. "Senior, please take a look. Is it correct?" Song Wanqing looked at the 25 paintings one by one. Suddenly, she pressed down and the paper turned into powder and fell. "Master, is that right?" Sun Mingwe asked curiously. Song Wanqing looked at him with rapt attention. Her bright eyes flickered and she revealed a smile. "You do have some ability." Chu Li smiled. "In that case, Senior still wants to send them?" "Of course." Song Wanqing nodded lightly. Chu Li was stunned for a moment before he came to a realization. He wanted to borrow a knife to kill someone. "Master," Sun Mingwe frowned. Song Wanqing said they should go and assassinate. As for whether they succeed or not, it might not be as you see it. Chu Li smiled and nodded without saying anything else. "Master," Sun Mingwe said angrily, "we can't let them die." Chapter 1556. If they're messing around, then just suppress them. Why send them to their deaths? Sun Mingwe shook her head and said, "They won't be able to stir up any trouble. There's nothing to be afraid of, so why kill them?" "Because of Chu Li, you don't have enough authority right now." Song Wanqing sighed and said, "Why do you think they let a woman suppress them? Those old fellows all want to overthrow the Holy Lady and let the men take charge." Sun Mingwe said, "There are very few people in the church who have the will to rebel. That's because they're hiding inside." Song Wanqing said lightly, "If they can't even hide it from you, what else can they do? You're underestimating these old fellows too much." Sun Mingwe frowned and did not say anything. Song Wanqing scoffed. "I'll say it now. The Wan Shirtong in the painting just now has 3 sons, 6 grandsons, and 2 granddaughters. They're all disciples of the church. Once he speaks, do you think his sons and grandsons will listen?" "I guess I'll listen." Sun Mingwe sighed and said, "After all, it's their ancestor. Without Wan Shirtong, they wouldn't have the chance to enter the Holy Church of Light. These sons and grandsons have wives, and wives have brothers and sisters. If Wan Shirtong speaks, at least 20 to 30 people will respond." Song Wanqing snorted and said, "If you openly suppress them and punish them, will these sons and grandsons harbor resentment?" "Yes." Sun Mingwe nodded. "Then these people will suppress their dissatisfaction at the bottom of their hearts and wait for a suitable opportunity. Someone will call for the abolition of the Holy Lady and let the 4 great guardian kings jointly preside over the affairs of the church. They will definitely respond. Women are weak in everyone's hearts and cannot climb on top of men." Song Wanqing snorted. Sun Mingwe sighed and nodded silently. She knew that what her master said made sense. Human nature was indeed like this. She could see through people's hearts and naturally knew how dark human nature was. However, to send these old fellows, who had made outstanding contributions to a desperate situation, it was fine if they didn't know that they were going to die. Knowing that they couldn't succeed, they still wanted to send them to their deaths. "Actually, when I was the Holy Lady, they were restless," Song Wanqing said lightly. "I had the same thoughts as you back then. I didn't have the heart to be ruthless. I kept them and turned a blind eye." "Master," Sun Mingwe was a little embarrassed. Chu Li stood at the side and did not say a word. He pretended that he did not exist. This was the most confidential matter, the most private of emotions, and could not be announced to the public. Song Wanqing said, "But now I know that tolerance will only make them more and more arrogant. Their way of thinking will never change, and they still have to keep instilling this idea into their juniors. Men are superior to women, and the Holy Maiden is not qualified to lead the sacred sect." Sun Mingwe remained silent. "So if you don't want too many people to die, then send them to sky beyond heaven." Song Wanqing snorted. "You can't bear to see too many people die." There are only two paths. One is to compromise with them and hand over your power, and the other is to send them to their deaths. You can only choose one. Can you let go of the sacred sect and hand it over to them? Sun Mingwe shook her head. She felt that she was doing well enough. If it was someone else, they would not be able to do what she did. Moreover, the Saint Church was becoming more and more prosperous under her governance. If it was someone else, it would be difficult for the Saint Church to maintain such momentum. Letting go would be irresponsible to all the disciples of the Holy Church. Song Wanqing said, "That's right. If we let them continue to agitate, there will be more people who will become restless. In the end, more people will die, and it will definitely weaken the strength of our Holy Church." Sigh. Sun Mingwe shook her head and sighed. Song Wanqing said, "You are about to become the leader. I want to clear the last obstacle for you, so that you won't encounter any trouble after you step onto the leader's position. Don't think that they won't dare to make a move just because you are an enlightened master. On the contrary, once you step onto the leader's position, it will be the best time for them to make a move. Because of the restrictions of the heavenly rules, enlightened masters cannot make a move against grandmasters. You can't make a move even if they rebel." Sun Mingwe shook her head. Song Wanqing scoffed. "Who said they rebelled? They are only hoping that the Holy Maiden will not lead the Holy Church. It is not a rebellion. They are still loyal to the Holy Church, and as an enlightened master, they cannot make a move." Sun Mingwen nodded lightly. Although she could see through people's hearts, she did not understand these flowery hearts well enough. This was because there was no need to do things like this. Pointing straight to the other party's heart was like giving the right medicine to the illness. "Master, let me deal with these old fellows," Sun Mingwe said. "There is no need to send them to their deaths. They all have weaknesses. Just find their weaknesses and make them submit. There is no need to use such methods. There will be endless troubles in the future." Song Wanqing frowned and looked at her. Sun Mingwe said, "People are not saints. How can they not have selfishness? As long as there is selfishness, there will be weaknesses. I will make it so that they have no time to care about these things. Master, don't worry, I will take care of it." Song Wanqing stared at her. Sun Mingwe was indeed blessed by the heavens and could see through people's hearts. As a master and an enlightened master, she did not have such an ability, so she had high hopes for Sun Mingwe. The prosperity of the Holy Church of Light would be realized in Sun Mingwe's hands. As a master, she had to help her and sweep away the last obstacle. Chuli coughed lightly. "I have something I don't know if I should say." "No need to say it." Sun Mingwe gave him a sidelong glance. Chuli smiled and looked at Song Wanqing. Song Wanqing smiled and said, "Why don't you say it? Chuli, you must have a wise opinion." Chuli said, "There is no harm in letting them go. It will be a warning to them, but there is no need to send them to their deaths. Leave them away to show the bishop's dignity and magnanimity. If they are unrepentant, it will not be too late for the saint to make a move." Song Wanqing shook her head. "They might not be grateful. They might even be angrier and oppose Sun Mingwe even more." Chuli smiled. "It will be too late to make a move. I believe that with the saint's ability, it will not be difficult to deal with these old fellows." "Senior, you have underestimated the saint." "Yes, master." Sun Mingwe nodded quickly. "All right, tell me." Song Wanqing saw that Sun Mingwe was firmly against it, so she did not force it. Chuli sat behind the table again and raised his pen. "Send another 25 masters to follow behind them. If they encounter any danger, they will immediately help. Also, there are 2 of us. You still have to go," Song Wanqing said impatiently. Chuli smiled and looked at Sun Mingwe. If she could not assassinate Zhong Wansheng, Sun Mingwe would not go to the reincarnation temple. She would definitely listen to her master. Sun Mingwe nodded. "That's good. It will be safer." Song Wanqing looked at Chuli. "Chuli, do you know that disciples of Goddess Attraction Mountain are not allowed to intervene in these matters?" "I know." Chuli nodded and smiled. "I will be punished. Since you know, you still want to help." Song Wanqing looked at Sun Mingwe. "Why?" Sun Mingwe quickly said, "Master, it's nothing. He just wants to return the favor." "Really?" Song Wanqing looked at Chu Li doubtfully. Chu Li smiled. Actually, I am not really involved. I'm just helping to save people. He had been deducing the 8 harmonies formation in his mind, thinking of a way to break it. Chapter 1557. All right, I'll do as you say. Song Wanqing nodded lightly and said, I'll leave this matter to you. I won't participate. Thank you, Master, Sun Mingwei said solemnly. Song Wanqing sighed. Master is about to ascend to the heavens. From now on, you'll be the only one left. Don't respect your feelings in everything. Yes. Sun Mingwei nodded vigorously. Song Wanqing glanced at Chu Li. Chu Li, you have to help her more. Even if she becomes the sect leader, don't abandon her. Chu Li smiled. Don't worry, senior. Song Xianqing nodded and floated away. Sun Mingwei sighed faintly and returned to her seat. She supported her chin with one hand and fell into silence. Chu Li raised his head to look at the sky with a dazed look in his eyes. He was immersed in the void of his mind, deducing the mystery of the 8-way formation and thinking of a way to break it. Guards! Sun Mingwei suddenly raised her voice. Du Ying entered gracefully in a green robe and curtsied. Summon these people here, Sun Mingwei said. She waved her pen and quickly wrote down the names of the 25 people. With a flick of her finger, 2 pieces of paper were sent to Du Ying. Du Ying took them with both hands and glanced at Chu Li with her bright eyes before leaving. Chu Li, you should hide for now, Sun Mingwei said. Chu Li's chin suddenly disappeared. Sun Mingwei summoned the 25 elders and told them about her plan to assassinate Zhong Wansheng. As expected, they objected to it. They felt that this was a suicide mission. If Zhong Wansheng was so easy to assassinate, he would have died 100 times, and the Fu dynasty would have killed him long ago. Although the Qiu dynasty's cavalry was not as strong as the Fu dynasty's, they were only slightly weaker. The Fu dynasty had always viewed him as a thorn in their side and had sent many top-notch experts to assassinate him. Time after time, Zhong Wansheng was still alive and well. An old man with white eyebrows and a sallow complexion cupped his fists and said in a deep voice, Saintess, it's not that we're disobeying orders, but this matter is simply too dangerous. There's no chance of success at all. We're just sending ourselves to our deaths. Sun Mingwei looked at him indifferently. Mr. Jiang, do you mean you don't want to go? If the Saintess insists on us going as subordinates, how can we disobey? Jiang Fengshan said in a deep voice. Sun Mingwei said, Elder Jiang means that I'm sending you to your deaths. That's not what we meant. Jiang Fengshan shook his head. The saint is so wise. How could she do such a thing? Saintess, is it because his old bones are occupying the space that the saintess sees? Another tall and burly old man with a face as red as a date snorted in a deep voice. You want us to give up our place, right? Sun Mingwei replied calmly. Elder Ming's words are sharp. The Great Light Peak has 9 peaks, and there are plenty of places. I'm only worried that there aren't enough masters in the peak and that our strength isn't strong enough. Seniors like you are the treasures of the peak. How can I bear to use you unless it's a critical moment? The Holy Maiden is flattering us old men. Meng Guangji said coldly. Sun Mingwei took a look at him, her heart calm and unperturbed by these sarcastic remarks. She said indifferently, with Zhong Wansheng as the commander, we will definitely lose this battle. Does anyone have any doubts about this? Everyone was silent. They were all aware of Zhong Wansheng's capabilities, and the Li dynasty had lost to him many times. The last time they won was because Zhong Wansheng did not personally lead the troops. This time, they would definitely lose. They had no choice but to assassinate Zhong Wansheng. Otherwise, why would the Holy Church of Light exist? Saintess, are we the only ones who won't do anything? Meng Guangji scoffed. Sun Mingwei shook her head. We can't count on them. We're the #1 sect, after all. We have to be the vanguard in this matter. If you're really unwilling, then forget it. I'll do it myself. Everyone was silent. That was for the best. Even if they died, it would be the Saintess who died, which was exactly what they wanted. A thin old man said in a deep voice, If the saintess does it herself, we won't be able to show our faces." Everyone immediately glared at him fiercely. The thin old man said, "The protectors around Zhong Wancheng are extremely strong. It won't be useful if there are fewer people. Seniors, there are a total of 25 people. That should be enough." Sun Mingwei said, "If there are more people, we'll be easily discovered. It'll be no different from a forceful attack. We'll definitely die." The thin old man, Hu Gaofeng, had been secretly subdued by her and dared not disobey her. Therefore, she knew the movements of these old men like the back of her hand. Among the 25 people, 4 of them were also her people. "That's true." Hu Gaofeng nodded. Their hearts were filled with hatred, silently cursing the vicious girl for actually using this method of borrowing a knife to kill others. No matter how capable they were, they could not disobey her orders. If she was really forced into a corner, she could issue a bishop's order. They could not disobey and could only obediently assassinate Zhong Wancheng. Otherwise, they would be criticized by the people in the Holy Church and lose their footing. Doing suddenly came in and gently walked to Sun Mingyue's side, handing her a small piece of paper. Sun Mingyue glanced at it and nodded. "All right, let's stop here. This matter must be kept a secret. We'll depart in 3 days." "Yes." Everyone helplessly saluted and left. They were indignant and were thinking of ways to save themselves from death. After they left, Sun Mingyue suddenly flashed and appeared at the place where Chu Li cultivated in isolation. In a crystal-clear cave, Chu Li was sitting with his legs crossed. There were 8 stones placed in front of his knees, and they were moving rapidly. It was a dazzling sight. When Sun Mingyue came in, she saw the shadows of the stones and raised her head to look at Chu Li curiously. Chu Li smiled. "This is the octagonal formation." "Octagonal formation?" Sun Mingyue was surprised. She looked carefully for a while, but could not see the trajectory of their movement. It was as if they had become one and turned into a rotating stone. This octagonal formation was indeed powerful and lived up to its name. Chu Li said, "Find 8 people with ordinary martial arts. I'll talk about the octagonal formation and let them practice it." "All right." Sun Mingyue nodded. She suddenly disappeared, and Chu Li disappeared as well. They both appeared in the Divine Light Basilica. Sun Mingyue called Doing over and told her the names of 8 people. After Doing left, Chu Li smiled. "Those old men must be taking advantage of their seniority. They must have given you a lot of trouble, right?" Sun Mingyue replied, "They're all right. Don't mind them." Chu Li closed fist saluted to show his respect. Not many people could be so broad-minded. It was not easy for a woman like her to be so broad-minded. It was admirable. After a quarter of an hour, 8 middle-aged men arrived at the Divine Light Basilica and reported their names. Chu Li taught them 8 sets of step techniques in the basilica. Each of them had 1 set. These steps were very simple, and they could learn it in one go. Then, the 8 of them stood together and practiced the step techniques. They had great teamwork, and soon, the octagonal formation was displayed. Shadows could be seen moving around, and it was hard to see which one of them was. It was as if the 8 of them had merged into one shadow. Sun Mingyue nodded slowly. Chu Li smiled. "This is the octagonal formation. Let those old men try to break it." "Thank you," Sun Mingyue said slowly. Deriving a set of formation was not an easy task. It was very exhausting. She was grateful. Chu Li smiled. "Why are we still talking about this?" Sun Mingyue glared at him. Chu Li then realized that the 8 people were still there. He closed fists saluted with a smile. "I'll come another day." Chapter 1558. Sun Mingyue frowned as she sat behind the table. Her eyes were filled with anger. The entire Divine Light Basilica was silent. The air seemed to have frozen. Chu Li suddenly appeared in a flash. When he saw her in such a state, he smiled. "What happened? They're all pretending to be dead." Sun Mingyue looked up at him and sighed. "I've underestimated their shamelessness. They're all self-mutilating. They said that they went berserk during their cultivation and were seriously injured." Chu Li smiled. "That's not a smart move. Since they're already like this, it's not appropriate for me to ask them to assassinate us. Sun Mingwe shook her head. Everyone will have their own opinions. Chu Li said, just heal their injuries. They're all seriously injured. They risked their lives this time. They're seriously injured. I've personally checked on them, and it'll be difficult for them to recover in a short period of time. Sun Mingwe shook her head and sighed. Even if we really want them to recover, it's not worth it to waste so many spirit pills. Spirit pills that could heal serious injuries in a short period of time were extremely precious. It would be a pity to waste them on shameless old men. Chu Li smiled as he took out 2 porcelain bottles from his inner pocket and handed them over. Here are 50 marrow replenishing pills. They can help them recover from their injuries quickly. Use one for now and leave the rest for them to protect themselves. It will also help them calm down. Marrow replenishing pill. Sun Mingwe took it. She had heard of this pill before. It was indeed a powerful spirit medicine that could heal injuries. However, a few spirit herbs had gone extinct, so no one had managed to cultivate it. She did not expect Chu Li to be able to do so. Chu Li smiled. They've consumed the marrow replenishing pill before. They'll know its effects and be at ease. This time, their injuries are just right. He had predicted these methods and went back to cultivate the marrow replenishing pill. Sun Mingwe frowned as she looked at him and sighed. Chu Li asked, are you going to be courteous with me again? All right, let them try. Sun Mingwe shook her head. She asked Duing to send the spirit pills over, but did not tell them what they were called. They had to eat the spirit pills that she gave them anyway. Duing would personally watch over them. If they did not eat it, it would mean that they were suspicious of the saint and disloyal to her. Sun Mingwe was certain that they would not dare to turn against her and would only dare to cause trouble in the dark. After Duing left, Chu Li said, actually, we don't need the other 25 people. The 2 of us are enough. He divined once more, and in the end, the 25 people who came later were destroyed, and the 25 people who came first escaped. All right. Sun Mingwe gave him a deep look. Chu Li smiled. Let these people attract their attention. We'll have to rely on ourselves to take action. Sun Mingwe nodded. She had the same intention. Even if the 25 old guys could break the 8-way formation, they might not be able to kill Zhong Wansheng. They were all unreliable, so it was safer for them to do it themselves. 2 hours later, 25 elders came to the Light Palace with solemn faces. After witnessing the power of the marrow replenishing pill, they also had some confidence. They faintly felt that this time, it might not be the holy maiden who wanted them to die. Otherwise, she would not have spent so much capital. Such an elixir was not commonly seen. With the protection of this spirit pill, even if they couldn't successfully assassinate him, they would still be able to escape. Moreover, they had also broken the 8-way formation. They had experienced the power of the 8-way formation and knew how to break it. With the addition of the marrow replenishing pill, they were instantly filled with confidence. They could not help but think that if they could really assassinate Zhong Wansheng, they would have made a great contribution. Even if they did something that went against the rules in the future, they would still be able to protect themselves. As long as they did not rebel, they would not be killed. Sun Mingwe picked up 3 silk sachets from the table and handed them to one of the elders. Elder Chong, the starting time is written on these 3 silk sachets. When the time is up, open them and act according to what's written on them. Yes. A burly elder gave a fist salute and took the 3 silk sachets. The 3 silk sachets were embroidered with the Great Light Peak pattern. The few threads were vivid and lifelike. I'll personally assist everyone, Sun Mingwe said faintly. If the situation changes and you can't do as you wish, you could decide to retreat on your own. However, remember to stay together and not spread out. Yes. Everyone gave a fist salute. Let's go. Sun Mingwe waved her hand. Everyone gave a fist salute and left. The group of 25 people performed their light body technique. After leaving the Great Light Peak, they traveled through the forest and avoided the main road to avoid exposing themselves. As soon as they arrived at Falling Autumn City, they opened the first silk sachet. The location they were going to was written on it. After they sneaked into the Qiu dynasty, according to the silk sachet, they arrived at the foot of a mountain and laid in ambush in a valley. Then they found a cave in the valley. The appearance of this cave made them believe the silk sachets were real. After lying in ambush in the cave for a day, they opened another silk sachet. This time, it was written that a group of martial arts masters would be passing by. They had to seal the cave in advance and use the concealment technique to wait for half a day. They hesitated for a while, but finally followed the instructions in the silk sachet. They sealed the cave with stones so that no one could see what it looked like, and no one would be able to find out. It would have been difficult for a newcomer to do this. However, they were all experts. They were all experienced people with outstanding achievements in the martial arts world. Hence, it was a piece of cake for them to do this. The air in the cave was extremely thin. Fortunately, they were all grandmasters and had used a heart technique similar to the turtle breathing technique. They breathed once in a while, so they were able to hold on. Then, according to the time indicated on the silk sachet, they opened the last silk sachet half a day later. There was a drawing in the silk sachet. It was the distribution of the protectors outside in Zhong Wanqing's location. They just had to follow their practice at the Great Light Peak. Bang! 25 people rushed out of the cave. There was a group of people surrounding a rustic old man outside the cave. It was Zhong Wanqing. Zhong Wanqing had left the military formation and personally come to this valley because he had received a piece of news. A spirit herb that his concubine desperately needed had appeared in this valley before. Perhaps he could find it again. This spirit herb was extremely rare and almost extinct. It required a lot of luck to obtain it. Ever since the spirit beasts entered 100,000 Hills, the spirit herbs have been going extinct and becoming fewer and fewer. Zhong Wanqing had no other shortcomings except for one. He was too sentimental. His concubine was the top courtesan of the Qiu dynasty and was regarded as a precious pearl. Unfortunately, she had contracted a terminal illness. If she could not be cured, she could only live for another year. Zhong Wanqing was extremely anxious to die at such a young age. In his opinion, the Li dynasty's cavalry was nothing to worry about. Even if he did not take action, his subordinates were enough to crush them. It was not as important as his concubine's illness. Zhong Wanqing smiled when he saw a group of people rushing out of the cave. His red cape fluttered behind him. Who else is coming to die? Marshal, they should be from the Li dynasty, an old man beside him said with a smile. They should be anxious. Kill them directly. Don't leave them alive. Zhong Wanqing said. Yes, the old man responded and waved his hand. 8 protectors rushed out from the group of protectors and faced the 25 masters. The other protectors smiled. In their opinion, 8 of them were enough to deal with these old fellows. They were very clear about the power of the 8-way formation. Chapter 1559. Chu Li and Sun Mingwei stood at the peak of the mountain and looked down at the fierce battle in the valley. They watched as the 25 elders from the Great Light Peak broke through the joint attack of the 8 elders like a hot knife through butter. They then proceeded to break through the joint attack of the remaining elders. The octagonal formation was like a piece of paper in front of them. There was no resistance at all. Before the 25 elders from the Great Light Peak were able to unleash their full power, the octagonal formation was defeated. Sun Mingwei nodded. It worked. Is the heaven peaking technique really that powerful? If it was really that powerful, the Divine Prophecy Pavilion would have been the overlord long ago. How could it still be inferior to the 8 major sects? Chu Li said, the heaven peaking technique is powerful, but it's useless without enough people to use it. The Great Light Peak is the one doing it. That's true. Sun Mingwei nodded. Seeing that the 25 elders had defeated all the protectors and surrounded Zhong Wanqing, Sun Mingwei said, this time, it's in the bag, right? Chu Li shook his head. You're underestimating Zhong Wanqing. Sun Mingwei turned to look at him. Chu Li said, Zhong Wanqing is a top-notch master who has been hiding his strength. He has cultivated a secret skill. What's going on? Sun Mingwei asked. Chu Li pointed below. You'll know when you see it. Why didn't you tell them? Sun Mingwei frowned. Chu Li smiled. I told them in the brocade pouch. Sun Mingwei stared at him. and shook her head as she looked below. Zhong Wanqing looked at the 25 people who were slowly approaching him and said, "Holy Church of Light, it seems like you have a spy around me who has peeked into the mystery of the octagonal formation. Surname Zhong, hand over your life." The group of old men shouted and began to attack. They were divided into 3 layers with 6 people in the innermost layer. They attacked at the same time with palm techniques. Bam, 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 bam. Zhong Wanqing did not dodge their attacks. He stood there calmly and looked at them with a cold smile. Everyone frowned. When the palm energy hit him, it was as if they had entered an empty iron pillar. They did not feel any hindrance and were strangely stable. They could not move him at all. After the first layer was attacked, the second layer followed. Bang, 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 bang. Endless palm strikes landed on his body, followed closely by the third layer. He was like an old tree in a storm, about to be destroyed at any time. However, no matter how fierce the storm was, it was not destroyed. Instead, it was abnormally tenacious, standing tall as before. Sun Mingyue furrowed her eyebrows as she pondered over what kind of martial art this was. No matter how strong one's endurance training was, they would not be able to withstand the crazy attacks of so many masters. These were all top-notch grandmasters with more than 200 years of cultivation. Their cultivation was profound and pure. Even she could not withstand it head-on. Zhong Wanqing, on the other hand, had a calm look on his face as if he was enjoying it. He smiled and shook his head. He only reacted to the palm energy that was aimed at his head and gently blocked it. He ignored the rest of the palm energy and allowed them to hit his body. This agitated the people from Great Light Peak even more. Their palm energy was as violent as a tidal wave. Chu Li turned his head and asked, "Could it be because of the Heavenly Frost treasure robe?" "Very likely." Sun Mingyue nodded. As soon as the two of them finished speaking, the elders from Great Light Peak began to draw their weapons. Some wielded swords while others wielded knives. All of them stabbed at him. Ding, 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 ding. The shadows of knives and swords flashed by. All the weapons that hit his body were sent flying more than 10 meters away. Clang, 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 clang. Sun Mingyue's eyebrows furrowed even more. Zhong Wanqing was like a tortoise shell. Palm energy could not hurt him, and blades and swords could not hurt him. He was indeed an anomaly. She turned her head and said, "This is black tortoise power." Chu Li raised his eyebrows. Black tortoise power? Zheng Dynasty's Black Tortoise Mountain's Black Tortoise Power. I didn't expect Zhong Wanqing to be a disciple of Zheng Dynasty's Black Tortoise Mountain. Sun Mingyue's expression was solemn. "I can't believe you didn't know such important information," Chu Li said thoughtfully. "No wonder he's so powerful. This Black Tortoise power is really amazing. It's already scary enough to be able to block 10 people, but he's able to block so many people's attacks. It's incredible." This kind of defense was at the level of an enlightened master. It was beyond imagination for a grandmaster to be able to do this. Chu Li knew that he would not be able to withstand such a siege, even if he had the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture and the Heavenly Demonic Spirit Devouring Technique. Sun Mingyue said, "Didn't you want to cultivate to become a god? It's a must to cultivate Black Tortoise power. With his current level, he might have already perfected it." Chu Li smiled. "In that case, I'd like to learn a thing or two from him. However, no matter how strong Black Tortoise power is, it's impossible for him to hold on forever," Sun Mingyue said. "He won't be able to hold on for long." Chu Li nodded. However, contrary to their expectations, Zhong Wanqing was unexpectedly strong. He had been besieged by 25 people for 2 hours, but he did not seem to be injured at all. Within these 2 hours, his protectors had mostly recovered. Thus, a chaotic battle ensued. After they switched to another formation instead of the octagonal formation, their power increased tremendously. The people from Great Light Peak slowly lost their advantage. Zhong Wanqing had used up too much of his inner energy, and they began to feel that his inner energy was insufficient. It was then that they realized the peculiarity of Zhong Wanqing's technique. It was extraordinarily exhausting of inner energy. One palm strike would consume a few times more inner energy than usual. After 2 hours, they felt as if they had lost everything. Zhong Wanqing's eyes were shining and his face was glowing. He seemed to be getting more and more energetic as he fought. From time to time, he would let out an indescribably carefree laugh. It's been a long time since I've fought to my heart's content. Satisfying. He laughed as he waved his palm to block the palm energy that was aimed at his head. As for the swords and blades, they were all repelled and could not get close to him. The palm energy of the people from Great Light Peak became soft. It was as if they would collapse at any time and be blown away by a gust of wind. Let's retreat. Elder Chong sighed. The people nodded and turned to leave. You want to leave? Zhong Wanqing scoffed. That depends on whether I agree to it or not. His body abruptly expanded and his brows turned black. The wrinkles on his face disappeared quickly as if he was 100 years younger. Instantly, wherever the palm energy passed, it whistled and was extremely shocking. Bam, 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 bam. The people from Great Light Peak were sent flying. After falling to the ground, they immediately spat out mouthfuls of blood. Their breaths were weak and their lives were in danger. They hurriedly took out porcelain bottles and swallowed the bone-replenishing pills. Chuli looked at Sun Mingwe. If we don't act now, they'll be finished. Let's go. Sun Mingwe nodded. In a flash, the two of them appeared in front of Zhong Wanqing. Zhong Wanqing's expression immediately turned serious. He took a step back and looked at the two of them. He did not notice the two of them approaching. When he did, every hair on his body stood on end, and he felt a chill run down his spine. His instincts, which had been honed from countless life and death situations, told him to escape as soon as possible. Who are you? Zhong Wanqing silently channeled his inner energy and mobilized all of it in preparation to perform an escape technique. Sun Mingwe said, You don't need to know. She lightly slapped her palm from behind. Zhong Wanqing suddenly turned into a blurry shadow and appeared 100 meters away in the next moment. Sun Mingwe's figure followed closely behind. Her white, jade-like palm landed lightly on his back. Bam! There was a loud sound. Chapter 1560. P.S. The 46th Alliance Leader has been born. The Alliance Leader is a scholar. Sun Mingwe snorted softly and followed up with another punch to his back. Zhong Wanqing was still full of vigor after taking a punch and a palm. His speed increased, and he disappeared again. The next moment, he appeared 300 meters away. If not for the fact that he was on top of the mountain, he would not have been seen at all. Sun Mingwe frowned as she felt that he was difficult to deal with. Although she had hit him with a punch, it was empty, as if his body was a bottomless pit. She could not feel his existence no matter how hard she tried. She was very clear about her own fist force. The divine light fist had been perfected and was extremely refined, as if it was real. When she punched him, the fist force seemed to have condensed into one and hit his body like a real iron fist. If one's cultivation level was slightly lower, he would have been seriously injured after taking this punch. His inner energy could not stop the fist force from rampaging. However, Zhong Wanqing was able to block it and was not injured after taking a palm and a punch. It was really strange. Chuli did not make a move. Personally fighting and watching from the sidelines were two different things. If he watched from the sidelines, even if his master were to blame him, he would have the leeway to deny it and receive a lighter punishment. However, it was different if he personally fought. He was not afraid of being punished to go into isolation, but he was afraid of going into isolation for a long period of time. That would delay his cultivation of the dragon taming technique. He needed a short period of isolation to build a good foundation. His foundation would inevitably be shaken due to his rapid progress. Sun Mingwe's next punch hit Zhong Wanqing again. Although Zhong Wanqing's body movement technique was fast, it was far from Sun Mingwe's shifting technique. Once his body had Sun Mingwe's inner energy, she could directly sense him. Even if he escaped 100 or 1,000 miles away, she could still catch him. Zhong Wanqing was still full of vigor after taking a punch. His face was glowing, and he looked even more spirited. Chu Li suddenly said, He can absorb other people's inner energy. Yes. Sun Mingwe nodded. Chu Li shook his head. He can't take more than a few punches. This was similar to the heavenly demonic spirit devouring technique that he cultivated. He could absorb inner energy and convert it. However, this technique had a fundamental limitation, which was that it could not break through its limits. His heavenly demonic spirit devouring technique could only absorb one hit from Enlightened Master. It was the same for Zhong Wansheng. No matter how powerful he was, it was impossible for him to devour internal energy limitlessly. Sun Mingwe's inner energy was completely different from that of the people from Great Light Peak. One punch from her was equivalent to dozens of punches from them. Moreover, Zhong Wansheng did not have the chance to hit Sun Mingwe to vent his inner energy. His inner energy was constantly accumulating and would explode after a few punches. Zhong Wansheng ran faster and faster. After a few punches, Chu Li and Sun Mingwe were already more than 10 miles away from the valley. Fortunately, all of them had the help of the marrow replenishing pill, so they didn't have to worry that someone would hit them when they were down. Zhong Wansheng's face turned redder and redder, his eyes sparkling. When Chu Li saw that he was about to collapse, he quickly said, "Wait for a while." Sun Mingwe looked at him with a frown. Chu Li smiled. "Marshal Zhong, we have something to ask." "Speak." Zhong Wansheng took the opportunity to regulate his breathing and suppress his boiling inner force. He said in a low voice, "If it's about the deployment of troops, it's better not to talk about it." Chu Li asked, "Is Marshal Zhong cultivating the black tortoise power?" "No." Zhong Wansheng shook his head. "This is the heaven-suppressing primordial armor art." Chu Li raised his eyebrows. "The heaven-suppressing primary armor technique?" "That's right." Zhong Wansheng scoffed. "I obtained it during a fortuitous encounter when I was young. I didn't expect to cultivate it so deeply in the military and reach such a level. God wants to use me to revitalize the Qiu dynasty." Chu Li glanced at Sun Mingwe. Sun Mingwe said faintly, "The heaven-suppressing primary armor technique is nonsense. It's up to you whether you believe it or not." Zhong Wansheng waved his hand and said in a low voice, "Don't think that I haven't guessed your identity. All right then, can you hand over the incantation of this technique? I can exchange it for your life. Actually, it's also an exchange for the fate of the Qiu dynasty. If you die in our hands, what's the use of keeping the heaven-suppressing primary armor technique? You guys are really greedy." Zhong Wansheng sneered sarcastically and shook his head. "You'll obtain my heart technique and get rid of me, killing two birds with one stone." Chu Li smiled. "Marshal Zhong, you're worrying too much. We can swear an oath." "Forget it." Zhong Wansheng shook his head. "I don't care who you are, I'll never agree to it. Whether you can kill me or not will depend on your capabilities. You're courting death." Sun Mingwe said faintly, "I'll grant your wish." Her killing intent towards Zhong Wansheng was extremely strong. Killing Zhong Wansheng could save millions of Li Dynasty soldiers. Bam, 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 bam. Zhong Wansheng continued to receive punches, and his body grew bigger. His face was gloomy, but it became unusually rosy. In the end, his face turned red as if he had rubbed cinnabar on it. Zhong Wansheng's speed became faster, but he was always a step behind Sun Mingwe. He was battered by Sun Mingwe and could not retaliate at all. However, he still could not be defeated under such circumstances. "Stop!" A loud shout exploded in their ears like muffled thunder. Chu Li appeared beside Sun Mingwe in a flash and held her hand. Instantly, the rich inner force of the supreme titanium scripture connected with each other. Chu Li hit the void with his palm, and a shining palm print hit the void. It was the Heavenly King Palm. The power of the Heavenly King Palm outside the Valley of 10 Peaks became more and more shocking. In an instant, it engulfed the turbulent spiritual energy and condensed into a shining palm print. It was so clear that it looked like a real golden palm. Bam! An explosion was even more shocking than the previous shout. The shining palm print was destroyed, and a middle-aged man in bright yellow clothes stepped out of the void. He was handsome and elegant. He stood in the void with his hands behind his back and had an extraordinary bearing. His eyes were like lightning as he stared at Chu Li. Chu Li smiled and looked at the handsome middle-aged man. His Majesty has come personally. Chen Jinji stared at Chu Li coldly and glanced at Sun Mingwei. Sun Mingwei and Chu Li held hands, so she could not attack Zhong Wanqing anymore. When she saw Chen Jinji coming, she knew that Zhong Wanqing's life was saved. She felt regretful. If Chen Jinji had come a little later, Zhong Wanqing would have collapsed. Chen Jinji laughed coldly. What a good scheme, Chief Song. Zhong Wanqing would not be assassinated by enlightened masters, so he had always been at ease. There was almost no one in the Outland who could assassinate him. He did not expect to send these two fellows and almost cause Zhong Wanqing to lose his life. Looking at Zhong Wanqing's expression, he knew that he had reached his limit. If he had come a little later, he would have regretted it. He had complicated feelings towards Zhong Wanqing. He hated Zhong Wanqing for acting on the surface, but refusing to let go of his military power. However, he could not do without Zhong Wanqing. Moreover, he was Zhong Wanqing's disciple and taught him the art of war. Your Majesty. Zhong Wanqing closed fists, saluted, and sighed. Chen Jinji said, Grand Marshal, you should leave first. Yes. Zhong Wanqing nodded and turned to leave. He did not even look at Chu Li and Sun Mingwei. Chu Li smiled and said, Your Majesty wants to spar with us? Your Majesty knows what the result will be. I am indeed not your opponent, but you can't kill me either. Chen Jinji scoffed. He had experienced the power of the two when they joined forces. It was indeed shocking. He was not their opponent, but he could escape unscathed. Chu Li said, That might not be the case. We were lenient the previous time. We are not the same as before. Your Majesty, do you want to learn a thing or two? Chapter 1561. The next moment, he appeared behind Zhong Wanqing and lightly struck with his palm, using the supreme diamond scripture. He had already seen through the circulation of Zhong Wanqing's heart technique. With the nature restoration manifestation, omniscient mirror, and star insight, he saw his weakness and predicted the circulation of his heart technique. This palm was light as a feather, but it accurately struck Zhong Wanqing's fatal weak point. The stronger the defense of a heart technique, the weaker the weakness. Zhong Wanqing had already let down his guard. He felt that with Chen Jinji, an enlightened master, he was safe and his light body technique was much slower. Just as he was about to adjust his breathing to suppress his boiling inner energy, Chu Li's palm energy arrived. This extremely mellow palm force was like throwing a spark into oil. There was a loud boom, and Zhong Wanqing spat out a mouthful of blood. He fell to the ground and spat out blood. His internal organs were being attacked by the tyrannical inner energy. This was being deranged. He had absorbed too much chaotic inner energy, which was very pure. If he had the chance to slowly dissolve it, he would be able to transform it into his own cultivation level and greatly improve his cultivation level. But now he was barely suppressing it. Any external force would cause him to collapse. You! Chen Jinji roared. Sun Mingwei suddenly struck with a divine light fist. Bam! Chen Jinji blocked the punch with one hand and appeared in front of Chu Li in a flash. Chu Li disappeared on the spot and appeared beside Sun Mingwei. As if he and Chen Jinji had teleported, their positions were reversed. Chen Jinji ignored him and looked down at Zhong Wanqing. His inner energy passed over to suppress the inner energy. In a short while, Zhong Wanqing's meridians were all broken, his internal organs were severely damaged, and his dantian was destroyed. He had lost his martial arts and became a cripple. But Chu Li did not think he could really cripple Zhong Wanqing. To an emperor, becoming a cripple was not impossible. As long as he was alive, there was hope. It would be even easier if an enlightened master were to take action. Chen Jinji looked up at Chu Li and stared at him. Chu Li smiled. It's all right. I can recover with a spirit pill. Why are you so angry? Chu Li, I'll remember you. Chen Jinji gritted his teeth. Chu Li said, Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty. It's my fault. You better not fall into my hands. Otherwise, I'll definitely make you suffer 1,000 times. Chun Jinji slowly said, his eyes abnormally resentful. What angered him the most was that Chu Li had severely injured Zhong Wancheng right in front of his eyes, but he had not been able to stop it in time. It looked as if he had deliberately not stopped Zhong Wancheng, taking the opportunity to cripple Zhong Wancheng. Zhong Wancheng would definitely be infuriated and think that he had been wrongly accused. However, he did have the panacea that could instantly restore one's martial arts, but it was also very precious. He only had 2 of them, which were originally reserved for the descendants of the royal family. It seemed that he could only use them now. Chu Li had ruined his reputation and a spirit pill with just 1 palm strike, which made him extremely resentful. He had never hated someone so much, especially when Chu Li was smiling, which made him even more detestable. Chu Li turned his head and smiled. Marshal Zhong, do you remember your heaven suppression primary armor technique? You want to cultivate? Dream on. Zhong Wancheng said softly as he lay on the ground. He revealed a smile and said, moreover, it's impossible for you to cultivate this divine art, because the prerequisite for cultivating it is to cripple your martial arts, just like what I am now. I see. Chu Li nodded. After crippling Zhong Wancheng's cultivation, the Heavenly Star Void technique was able to break through his baleful aura barrier. He had seen through Zhong Wancheng's thoughts. He wanted to obtain Zhong Wancheng's heaven-suppressing armor technique, not because of this technique, but because he knew that it was the Black Tortoise power. However, Zhong Wancheng would never admit it, or else his identity as a member of the Zheng dynasty would be exposed. He was originally a disciple of Black Tortoise Mountain in Zheng dynasty. Later on, he secretly cultivated Black Tortoise Mountain's secret skill, the engulfing heaven and spitting earth technique. After he was discovered, he betrayed Black Tortoise Mountain and fled to Qiu dynasty. He was a genius in both martial arts and military affairs. He had integrated the essence of the Black Tortoise divine art into the military formation, which allowed him to be as steady as a rock when commanding troops. He had combined the devouring heaven and spitting earth technique with the Black Tortoise divine art, which allowed his cultivation to advance at an abnormally fast pace, resulting in his current cultivation base. Chu Li couldn't help but sigh with emotion. There were indeed many geniuses in the world, and it all depended on their own fate and luck. For someone like Zhong Wancheng, if he had stayed in the Black Tortoise Mountain and cultivated according to the rules, it would have been difficult for him to achieve what he had today. Chun Jinji slowly got up, his bright yellow robes fluttering in the wind. His killing intent boiled as he punched out. Bam! Sun Minghua punched out. The fist force exploded, and dust filled the air. When the dust settled, Chun Jinji and Zhong Wancheng were nowhere to be seen. Sun Minghua scanned her surroundings and was about to give chase. Chu Li shook his head. Forget it. This is a rare opportunity. How can we give up halfway? Sun Minghua scoffed in dissatisfaction. Chu Li shook his head and sighed. We can't kill Zhong Wancheng. That might not be the case. Sun Minghua said. Chu Li said, actually, there's no need to kill him. I've received a piece of news that'll be enough to make him suffer. What news? Sun Minghua scoffed. She glanced at the direction where they disappeared unwillingly. Chu Li smiled. Zhong Wancheng is a traitor of the Black Tortoise Mountain. Do you think the Black Tortoise Mountain will make a move if this news is leaked to the world? Of course. Sun Minghua nodded. The dignity of the sect was above everything else. Once the news of a traitor was known, even if he was the emperor, he would make a move without hesitation. Chu Li said, his original name is Gu Xingfa. All right, I'll spread the news. Sun Minghua said. After Zhong Wancheng's martial arts was crippled, Sun Minghua could read his mind. Through Chu Li's questioning, she knew that he did not cultivate the heaven suppression armor technique, but the Black Tortoise power. She was already suspicious, but now that Chu Li said it, she believed him. Chu Li said, it's best to subdue the enemy without fighting. We should go to the reincarnation temple now. Let's wait. Sun Minghua shook her head. Chu Li stared at her. Sun Minghua scoffed. Don't worry, I won't go back on my word. But can we still fight Monk Lu and Ming? Why not? Chuli asked. Sun Mingwe said, "How many punches and palms can you throw?" Chuli was silent and smiled. "That's true. All right, let's go to Ten Despair Valley first. I've been wanting to see the evil nether dragon." Sun Mingwe suppressed her embarrassment. She was furious at Chuli. This was something he should have said, but he forced her to say it. It was really awkward. The two returned to Ten Despair Valley to cultivate the supreme diamond scripture. The evil nether dragon was stirring up trouble. The pool water was boiling under its control, and it was beginning to understand the dragon's divine power. In the evening, the sunset died, the reincarnation temple red. Chu Li and Sun Mingwe stood in the distance and looked at the reincarnation temple. The chanting lingered in their ears, floating in the air. It was condensed and did not dissipate. It calmed one's mind and made them less murderous. "Enter the reincarnation pagoda directly. We can't delay," Chu Li said softly. "Otherwise, it'll be difficult to enter if we're on guard." "All right," Sun Mingwe nodded. The two suddenly appeared under a dark bronze pagoda and broke through the formation's obstruction. Dong dong dong. Waves of bronze bell sounds echoed throughout the reincarnation temple. Chapter 1562. Chu Li pressed his hand on the tower. It was not made of pure copper. The material was strange, and he had never felt it before. It was as cold iron. The cold air immediately entered his palm as if it was going to freeze him. Sun Mingyue's expression changed when she saw that he was not moving. She quickly reached out to press on it. Chu Li quickly stopped her. The bone-chilling cold air circulated in his body. It was extremely and extremely cold. He activated the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture to convert it into extremely young inner energy and exhaled it onto the tower. Endless cold air entered his body, and he exhaled endless yang energy. His right palm slowly sank into the tower. It was like a hot knife touching butter. There was no resistance. Chu Li used his left hand to pull his right sleeve to cover his right palm. Amidst a flurry of hurried footsteps, a group of red-robed monks floated over and surrounded the two. In the blink of an eye, more than 100 monks had gathered. All of them were bald men with ring scars. Namo Amitba. An old monk stepped forward with a solemn look in his eyes. He looked at the two of them with a solemn expression. "My humble temple has failed to welcome the two benefactors with your presence. May I know what brings you here? I want to go in and take a look." Sun Mingwe pointed at the rotary tower. "Namo Amitba." The old monk shook his head and sighed. "This is the tower of inheritance of our temple. Outsiders are not allowed to enter. Please forgive us, almsgivers. Moreover, you can't enter either. Only disciples of our temple can enter. This is the great divine power of our founder." Chu Li's right palm was covered by his sleeve. Others could not see that his palm had sunk into the tower. Although the monks were furious and did not know how the two of them avoided the temple's protective formation, they were not worried. The two of them could not enter the rotary tower. It was useless even if their martial arts were amazing. This was the foundation of the reincarnation temple. Sun Mingwe said, "This isn't a place of inheritance. It's a treasure, right?" Namo Amitba. The old monk's expression did not change. He shook his head and sighed. "Lady, you're mistaken. The rotary tower contains the truth of heaven and earth, the mystery of reincarnation and life. If you can comprehend it in the tower, you'll obtain supreme wisdom and freedom. From there, you can cultivate the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture. It's not a treasure or weapon. You don't have to covet it." Sun Mingwe scoffed. "We're just curious. My master was injured by your tower of inheritance." The old monk's expression changed slightly. "So, it's the saintess." Sun Mingwe said, "You don't have to say anything more. We must go in and take a look." Namo Amitba. The old monk did not speak further. He shook his head and sighed. "Saint, why are you asking for trouble?" "You must be almsgiver Chu?" "That's me." Chu Li smiled. "What a coincidence. I've also cultivated the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture. I've even sparred with your temple's monk Shishan, and I've made great progress. I'm here to explore the pagoda." As soon as he finished speaking, there was a muffled rumble in front of him, and a hole appeared. Chu Li pulled Sun Mingyue along and disappeared from the cave. Namo Umitba. The old monk raised his brows and shouted, "Inform the seniors in the pagoda." Yes. The two monks nodded. They leaped up and knocked on the pagoda's waist a few times. Doke, 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 doke. After a rhythmic knocking sound, the two middle-aged monks landed and nodded. This was their method of communication. Apart from them, no one else knew that there was only one position in the entire pagoda that could be transmitted into the pagoda. Voices from other positions could not be transmitted into the pagoda. Once one stepped into the temple, one would enter another world and be completely isolated from the outside world. The knocking sound was to inform the people inside that two enemies had entered the pagoda and to be careful to eliminate them. As soon as Chu Li and Sun Mingyue stepped into the pagoda, their vision darkened. Then they found themselves in the wilderness. From the outside, the iron pagoda's diameter was only about 50 steps. Now that they had stepped into the pagoda, they realized that the surroundings were vast and boundless. They were surrounded by wild beasts that were even larger than the evil nether dragon. They were about to crash into them at any time. Chu Li did not dodge them. He watched as they crashed into him, but passed through his body as if they were illusions. Chu Li squinted his eyes and felt that they were not ordinary illusions. It was as if these were souls that would make him feel a little dizzy when they bumped into him. He turned his head and said, "Don't let them hit you." Sun Mingyue nodded. She was already dodging and did not crash into them head-on like Chu Li. "This is a formation." Sun Mingyue scoffed. Chu Li nodded. If it was just a formation, his Heavenly Star insight skill could break it in an instant. However, he could not break this formation. He also felt that his divine power was being suppressed. Not only could he not use the omniscient mirror, but he also could not use God's limbs. The Heavenly Star insight skill was not a divine power, so he could use it. Unfortunately, its power was greatly reduced here. He suddenly understood why the Heavenly Star insight skill was so powerful. It was because of the omniscient mirror support. Without the omniscient mirror, the Heavenly Star insight skill's power was greatly reduced and could not be compared to before. There were many types of giant beasts in the wilderness. There were leopards, tigers, eagles, lions, and even some giant rabbits. They were extremely fast. In a single leap, they were faster than when they used their light body technique. Sun Mingyue said in a low voice, "They're getting more and more ferocious." As soon as she finished speaking, 6 flying tigers charged at her, not giving her a chance to dodge. She could only float upwards to dodge, but she did not expect the flying tigers to suddenly rush up and hit her. Just as she was about to dodge, she did not vanish. The 6 flying tigers pounced on her. Chu Li suddenly stood in front of her, but he could not block the 6 flying tigers. They silently passed through his body, and then through Sun Mingyue's body. Sun Mingyue stiffened for a moment, but she quickly recovered and let out a long sigh. Fortunately, it's an illusion. If it were real flying tigers, we'd be dead by now. Chu Li's expression was solemn. If it were someone else, they'd be dead for sure. His soul energy was very strong. Although Sun Mingyue was not as strong as him, she was still very strong and far surpassed ordinary people. If it were someone else, their soul would have been destroyed. "It's that powerful?" Sun Mingyue asked. "This is an illusion formation." Chu Li frowned. "But it's not an illusion. It's the soul that gets hurt when it pounces on us." "That's strange." Sun Mingyue frowned. The two of them kept dodging the groups of beasts. Chu Li slid his feet, one on the left and one on the right with Sun Mingyue. From time to time, they would make some unimaginable dodging moves. They were extremely agile. However, as they dodged, more and more beasts ran over. In the end, they were surrounded by a dense group of beasts, not giving them a chance to dodge. It was useless to strike with their palms. They were all illusions, unaffected by palm energy and fist force. They continued to pounce on them. After being hit a few times, Sun Mingyue's face gradually turned pale. She said in a low voice, "This is bad. I feel dizzy and want to sleep." Chu Li suddenly clenched his teeth and sat cross-legged on the ground. "I'll take care of them." "Ow!" Sun Mingwe frowned. This formation was truly terrifying. All of their abilities were useless here. They could not break it or escape. It was like entering a prison. If they continued like this, they would fall into a deep sleep and never wake up again. Chapter 1563. Chu Li entered the void of his mind and immersed himself in it wholeheartedly. Then, the concentration talisman slowly floated out from behind the omniscient mirror and appeared in the air. A huge golden word flashed in the void like a star. As soon as the concentration talisman appeared, strands of white threads appeared in the void of his mind, and it started to drizzle. He visualized the 6 golden symbols in his mind again. The more concentration talismans there were, the denser the white threads surged into the void of his mind. It was as if the drizzle had turned into a drizzle. The 6 golden concentration talismans began to spin faster and faster, eventually forming a golden circle. With the appearance of the golden rings, the drizzle turned into a downpour. When the heavy rain fell on the bodies of the Vajra, the 3 Buddhas, and the devil, they quickly solidified. The effect was several times stronger than the lotuses. Chu Li could clearly feel their changes. Once they condensed, their respective cultivations also advanced, their various scriptures and techniques all far superior to before. As the rain continued to pour, the void in his mind continued to expand. It was boundless, becoming deeper and higher. When he slowly opened his eyes, he felt full of energy as if he had just had a good sleep. Everything around him was indescribably clear and moving. Moreover, he could already use the omniscient mirror. In an instant, he saw that he was on the empty ground on the first floor. There were murals around him, which were exactly what monk Zhishan had seen. Sun Mingwe looked at him curiously. When Chu Li's eyes met hers, Sun Mingwe sighed. "What secret skill is this?" Chu Li smiled. "It's just a small skill that I obtained by accident. I didn't expect it to work." The illusory formation from before was not purely an illusion. Instead, it was some souls that had been preserved in this tower. However, it benefited Chu Li as he could feel that his omniscient mirror did not expand its observation range. Instead, he could see a little deeper. After all, there weren't many souls on the first floor of the pagoda. Sun Mingwe shook her head and said, "If it wasn't for your little trick, we really wouldn't have been able to escape." Chu Li nodded. Under their formation, the Mahavrokhana's immobility scripture could protect the both of them, but could not break the formation. The Heavenly Star Void technique could not be used either. If this dragged on, they would definitely become meat on the chopping block. Sun Mingwe said, "In my opinion, it's better for us to leave. This tower is really mysterious." Chu Li said, "Since you're here, let's take a look first." "All right." Sun Mingwe didn't try to persuade him any further. The two of them stood up and looked at the murals around them. It was a picture of the cycle of life and death, from a fetus to birth, then to growth, then to aging, and finally to death. These kinds of murals were not rare, and the artist's skills were not very high either. They were clear and vivid, but there was a strange aura lingering around these murals. When Sun Mingwe looked at these murals, she seemed to have become the person in the murals. She followed the path of life in the murals, lived once, and finally died. Sun Mingwe suddenly snorted and opened her eyes. Just now, she was in a daze as if she was in a dream. When she was about to die and her mind was about to sink into oblivion, she suddenly had a flash of inspiration and woke up. She let out a long sigh of relief. She really thought she was going to die. Chu Li calmly looked at these murals. His Heavenly Star Insight technique circulated rapidly as he tried to derive the mysteries of these murals. This was completely different from the illusory matrix that they had seen before. It was more subtle and profound, but it was not harmful. Otherwise, Sun Mingwe would not have been able to observe it with ease. She would have sensed it and avoided it. Sun Mingwe's soul power was not as strong as Chu Li's, but it was far more powerful than ordinary people. Otherwise, she would not have been able to see through people's minds and fall into an illusion immediately after looking at these murals. Not only was she not injured after coming out of the illusion, but she was also greatly benefited. Such a formation could be said to be exquisite. He was not affected by the formation because he had died several times and was not sensitive to life and death. Sun Mingyue's eyes flashed with a strange brilliance. She sighed and said, "I've understood a lot about life and death." Chuli nodded. "This is the foundation of the Earth Matrix and reincarnation scripture. Let's continue upstairs." The two of them glided along the stairs to the second floor. As soon as they stepped on the second floor, they were instantly shrouded by a white fog, and they could not see anything clearly. Chu Li visualized the 6 paths concentration talismans in his mind. The fog entered the space between his eyebrows. After a while, the scenery in front of him changed. It was another empty building with a few cattail hassocks in the middle. Other than that, there was nothing else. The surrounding walls were still covered with murals. Sun Mingyue walked to the murals. She did not sense any danger, so she looked at them without worry. The murals depicted a man who had grown from a lowly servant to a minister of the imperial court. He had many wives and concubines, and he held a high position. However, he could not avoid aging and dying. In the end, he died under the watchful eyes of his children and grandchildren. Sun Mingyue went through another baptism and finally came to her senses. Her eyes flashed again as she understood more. This greatly improved her state of mind, and her heart became purer and more transparent. She looked at Chu Li, who had his eyes closed. The fog around him kept entering the space between his eyebrows. It was indescribably strange. His expression kept changing, and it was inexplicably complicated. Sigh. Chu Li suddenly sighed and opened his eyes. Sun Mingyue smiled. "How is it?" "Great." Chu Li nodded and sighed. "I felt very emotional." In fact, the situation in the murals was very similar to his. They both started out as servants and eventually grew to become top-notch existences. In the end, they still died. He could clearly feel his unwillingness and helplessness. Therefore, his pursuit of becoming an enlightened master became more and more determined. Both floors had good endings, so although he felt regretful after seeing them, he did not feel sad or angry. From the 3rd floor all the way to the 6th floor, there were people who did not have good endings. Some died young, some had unfulfilled ambitions, and some died by swords. After seeing them, there was a sense of oppression and anger in his heart. He dispelled this oppression and anger, and his Earth Matrix and reincarnation scripture slowly improved. Every time he went up the stairs, he would be shrouded in fog. This fog was absorbed by Chu Li and turned into pure energy to nourish the Buddhas and demons in his mind. He never got tired of it. There was no one on the 6th floor. It was empty, and only the two of them could quietly observe the murals. When they arrived at the 7th floor, they were blocked by an invisible force, and they could not step in. Under the observation of the omniscient mirror, this was a formless but substantial fog. The force was gentle but tough. The two of them tried their best to move forward, but they could not break through it. Even the Heavenly Star insight skill was useless. This was not a formation, but real energy. Chu Li and Sun Mingyue shook hands and activated the Supreme Diamond Scripture. A rich aura surged, and, at the same time, the Brahma wheel began to absorb the spiritual energy of the Outland. Chu Li suddenly realized that the spiritual energy absorbed by the Brahma wheel had changed. It was no longer extreme yang, but a cool aura. It was a combination of yin and yang. Although it was not as deep as the Supreme Diamond Scripture, it was qualitatively different from the original extreme yang. Boom! The life and death tree suddenly appeared in the void of his mind, and then slowly disappeared. Chu Li had a hint of understanding, and his life and death scripture advanced to another level. After the advancement of the life and death scripture, he had to slowly explore the mystery of it, but it was undoubtedly a good thing. It should be related to the souls absorbed from the tower. Just this harvest alone was endless. He gathered his spirit and worked hard. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.